collaboration with a broader regional management group. And we're, again, here today to do that. But today we're also interested in listening on how things really get done on private lands, particularly in the wildland-urban interface. And no matter how good the planning is, unless you have capable people at different levels, things don't happen. So hopefully today we'll learn all that better and move on.
Okay, so I would like to welcome everybody. I'm the coordinator for this group, the Uplands and Forest Workgroup for the IRWM plan, which is our water plan update. And can we go around the room and do introductions, please? I hope you all signed in and got some food and coffee. You want to start, Lynn?
Okay. Hi, I'm Lynn Campbell. I'm from the Sierra Nevada Conservancy, a state agency based out of Auburn. But I'm the North Central Subregion representative. So we come and try to attend meetings and hear about issues and help you however we can. We have a grant program right now, so if you want to do something with that, come and talk to me. I brought some packets about that.
I'm Rachel Norton. I'm the outreach coordinator for the Feather River Stewardship Coalition. We're a collaborative group based out of this county here, working to work with public lands and private landscape projects then.
Jay Francis, Forest Manager for Collins Pine Company in Chester.
I'm Patrick Flynn. I have a service called Sierra Environmental, and I work with groundwater, and I thought I would come hear what was going on.
I'm Zeke Lunder. I work with Deer Creek Resources in Chico. We do fire and fuels consulting, and we're also working with this with the Upper Feather River IRWM as providing tech support and also coordinating work through the mapping. So using mapping to help steer these discussions about integrating resource management and water management.
I'm Ryan McKillop, an inventory forester with Soper Wheeler Company, who owns and manages a fair amount of land in Uplands County, but we're spread out all over the place.
Lorena Corbett with the Maidu Summit Consortium and also the Maidu Cultural Development Group.
Trina Cunningham, the Upper Feather River Irwin Tribal Outreach.
Randy Wilson, Plumas County Planning Director, co-manager of the Flood Control District, and overall project manager for the county on this project.
So we're expecting a few more people.
We're not done yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Got somebody behind you.
So right brain, left
That.
brain.
I'm Ryan Hilburn. I'm the Southern District Forester for WM Beatty and Associates.
Darlene Amy, I'm with Yankee Hill Fire Safe Council.
Brenda Reitmeyer, Managing Director for Yankee Hill Fire Safe Council, and also run a consulting service and helping fire safe councils with projects.
I'm Chuck Marshall. I'm the Wildfire Safety Education Field Coordinator for Butte County Fire Safe Council.
I'm Christy Jamieson, and I am Leah's equivalent for the Ag Land Stewardship Workgroup for the Urban.
All right, so we are expecting to have a representative from the Lassen Fire Safe Council here, as well as the Plumas Fire Safe Council. But as you know, the further away you come, you're either early or you're late. So we expect to see them soon, but that's why we pushed your presentation a little further back, because people were coming from so far. So what we're going to start with is, for you folks that haven't been involved with this, the IRWM plan has these guidelines, and they're pretty rigorous on what we have to produce, but we decided in this region we're going to try and build this thing from the ground up. So that means the poor work group members have to suffer through some of these planning exercises. And the one for today is the California Water Plan. This last 2013 California Water Plan for the first time included forest management, and we were excited about that. But as we went through I went through it with our chairs. The way we do this in this work group anyways, the coordinator and the chairs get together and we do a draft of recommendations for the rest of the work group to work on together, because if everybody just looks at it cold, you could spend hours, and people don't want to spend hours on just planning efforts. And so what we did is we went through the recommendations for the resource management strategies that this group selected. There's like 30 of them that that the California Water Plan includes. And as we go through them, we picked about 6 or 5 of them. And our job is to make recommendations back to the Department of Water Resources for the next California Water Plan update. And one of our interests in this work group is economic incentives for landscape scale fuel treatments, which is not an easy thing to come by. And so when you see economic incentives, a lot of what we're trying to do here is when they develop bonds and what is going to be eligible activities in bonds, we want to be really clear what it is we'd like to see, at least for fuels and forest health, what we'd like to see. So that's why you see economic incentives sprinkled all the way through this, and then we have a category as well. So, let me see if I can do this. Okay, first thing we're gonna do is, Randy's gonna kind of give us an update on the last 2 meetings. Hi, Nels.
So the overall steering committee, basically the decision-making body, is called the Regional Water Management Group. That's a label that comes from DWR's guidelines on integrated regional water management planning. Just briefly, I'm going to give a brief summary of the last 2 regional water management group meetings. There's been project updates. I'm going to start with the September 23rd meeting. We have a consulting firm, Hinman, who is really the prime consultant, the sub-consultants underneath her. She manages these meetings and does minutes. To date, on September 23rd, we had 34 MOUs signed by participants. Myself, Trina Cunningham, and Umi Hinman went down and met with Vicki Newland at the Butte County Water Agency, and I'm now working with Vicki on an MOU between Butte County Water Agency and the plan process. She gave me a draft and I provided it to our county council, and her county council is also working on it. So we're working on that part of it. We're pretty much on schedule to finish in May or June of 2016, the 2-year process. We're doing various studies, forest water balance study, climate change technical study, DAC assessment, and community vulnerability study. We're working on DWR's definition of disadvantaged community, which is 80% of median state income. They've recently released a new tool, and it's about as good as the one they had before they released the new one, meaning it isn't very good. There's been a lot of stakeholder outreach. You're part of it. The new people in the room. At that 23rd meeting, September, Trina Cunningham gave a brief presentation on traditional ecological knowledge, or TEK. We initially started this process with project solicitations. We got somewhere around 80 projects in that solicitation. We're now working on refining those projects, but we presented to the Regional Water Management Group suggested process for doing the chapters. The chapters will be developed. Internal staff, Uma and I, will review them. They'll be released approximately every 2 weeks. I just got another one this morning. They'll be released for a 30-day comment period. Comments are go to Uma. So we're in that process. Right now, 2 chapters, the governance and the climate change, are out for review. And the next one is, I can find it here quickly.
Is it the region description?
The one I got another one this morning, which I haven't looked at. So So the regional water management group is not going to do an initial review of these chapters. We're gonna send it out to everybody, get everybody's comments, make tweaks, and then bring it to the group for their decision. At the September 23rd meeting, the municipal services group brought forth their regional, the RMS strategies, which you'll be going over today for this group. And then there was a summary of what was done with the working group integration on August 21st. All the work groups got together and the coordinators to look at integrating projects together and to present what everybody else was doing. Also at that meeting, the climate change consultants, which we have to address, did a presentation and went over climate change vulnerabilities. Just a brief summary of the projects. The Ag Stewardship Group has 13, floodplains, meadows, and water bodies 15, Municipal Services 39, Tribal Advisory Committee 5, and the Uplands and Forests 9. One of the big discussions is what to do with prioritizing projects. And basically, the Regional Water Management Group has decided not to prioritize projects, but to develop them. And so when there is a funding opportunity, everything that projects are then selected to fit that funding opportunity instead of every project having a, So we're not going to prioritize projects, which is sort of a big deal. What else?
It's okay.
So that's pretty much a summary of the September 23rd. For the October 23rd meeting, again, there was an update on the status of the project.
Andy, I had a question. When you say no prioritizing, that's one thing, but is the group gonna kind of give a blessing to all the projects? and
Yes.
Say that they meet the basic criteria, so
Right.
then the groups can go find the money?
They really don't want to kick out any projects, so they're going to bless them.
Unless they're really bad.
Unless they're really bad. But I don't think they kicked anybody out yet. The only ones that they kicked out initially were those that were provided that weren't backed with an MOU for the organization. So they've been, projects are in. So at the last meeting last month, the Sierra Nevada Conservancy came and provided a presentation on the watershed improvement program and grant opportunities. I guess that's a quick summary. A lot of that meeting, the climate change consultants came up and went over the information. There's a tool to address greenhouse gases that'll be coming up a little bit today. And they kind of went over the climate change chapter. And the next meeting of that work group, I don't have that date.
December 4th.
December 4th. So that's a summary of the two last regional water management group meetings.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions on that?
Okay, so we're gonna get into our first task. We are on the book to present to the Regional Water Management Group on the December 4th. And then it'll probably John or Mikey Lasso will be presenting. So what we developed today is what we'll bring forward to them. And we're gonna maybe co-present with the tribes, but we're gonna be on the same day anyway. And so we'll both go together on that. And so one of the things we're doing today is we're co-presenting or having a co-meeting to talk about these resource management strategies and in preparation for what we're gonna do in December. But we're gonna spend most of our time on the Uplands and Forest, knowing that the tribes have a great interest in these issues and because we're such a big part of the landscape, at about 75% of the landscape. And then the tribes will be, of course, bringing their own issues forward as well. So, as I said, our work group picked these resource management strategies. This one is number 21 out of some 30 that's in the California Water Plan. But what we're doing now is providing recommendations back to the water plan on what it is that we want to see happen with the strategies. So that's why they're called resource management strategy recommendations. And so this is what the chairs came up with. We pulled a lot of this out of the California Water Plan. We figured they'll be a lot more responsive if we give them back a lot of what they already thought was important. But I don't know, Ryan, when we first talked about all these recommendations, we had both looked at some of the forest management. You can see that whole chapter there. It's a handout for you. And the forest management was a whole lot about water quality. And that's kind of not where this work group went. The work group said, well, we've got BMPs for water quality. We're kind of done with that subject. So we got into storage and, forest health and wildfire. And so you'll see that, and economic incentives to make all this stuff happen. So that's the kind of the tone of what we're giving back to the California Water Plan. So what we're gonna go through is I wanna get feedback from the members here of things that, are not clear, things that they're not comfortable with, things that we should add to. So we'll just walk through this and try not to take a whole lot of time, but make sure that we cover it so everybody's satisfied. So here's one of our resource management strategies called ecosystem restoration. So now I'm gonna open it up to you guys and see if you have any comments.
Kind of want to go through it.
Do you want me to read them?
Well, I don't know if you need to read it.
Maintain and restore diversity of habitats. We're talking about connectivity. And our emphasis is a lot about how to conserve ecological values from total devastation by catastrophic fire. And we realize some fire is good and some fire isn't. And we'll get into that a lot more today. And so we basically identified the idea that we have best management practices to conserve ecosystem and to maintain water quality. And we identified springs, because that's a tribally important area.
I was just gonna say, I'm not seeing it, is prescribed burning, you mentioned in there anywhere?
It's not, and the number one thing we have not done is add burning. We've done a lot about protecting ourselves from catastrophic fire, and that's why we're co-presenting with the tribes, because that is a tremendous interest to the tribes about reintroducing fire in this landscape.
Are you suggesting that be added?
Yeah,
So what,
As one of these bullets, you mean?
Yeah.
I think it's pretty
Or
important.
at this
to talk about
place.
Ecosystem restoration.
so,
Both prescribed burning and low intensity managed wildfire.
Sure.
so how do we wanna say it? Introduced prescribed burning and low intensity, or support the introduction of?
We want to get to a point where where our forests are in a condition where we can let fires burn in the backcountry. So that's part of it.
All right, so develop ecological conditions that allow the reintroduction of low intensity.
But we also want to provide economic incentives for people to actually do the work of burning.
So it's positive economic incentives, but also the removal of negative incentives, like being sued by your neighbor,
Yeah.
which has happened every week, it seems.
Yeah.
That's a scary part of it, because if you are doing burning operations, you are liable,
Right.
so.
And from the tribal perspective, part of it, we're looking at biomass facilities right now in Plymouth County. And hopefully those biomass facilities will transition into other facilities when we no longer need biomass. So it's our perspective that eventually we will have thinned the forests to a state that we can do regular broadcast burning. If there's lightning strikes, there isn't going to be a lot of damage. And so we want to get the forest part into that condition again, holding water, things like that. But then also, it goes beyond trees. It's the overall biodiversity, enhanced biodiversity of other plants and species. And in timber selected areas, things can be managed specifically for those things. And so just prioritize
something I'll run by you.
Since I'm new to this, this is more, not in the wildland urban interface?
It's the landscape. It's
Okay.
basically recommendations for this whole landscape. When we get to the end of this, we have really specific strategies that we developed inside this work group and that we call out the wild urban interface. But we're gonna get into the next one, which is forest management. So if we want to, oh yeah. If we want to call out something more specific in the WUI, we certainly can do that. But I'm hearing, now, we don't have anything about prescribed fire in this one either. We say on the second, well, it isn't on this page, we talk about, research.
Well, fire resiliency, I mean, just as a general term, we have different tools for achieving that, but, you know, I don't see resiliency part in there either.
Yeah, where do we put it?
Yeah.
Okay, let me go to the next page and see where,
So, but this
well-
one is just monitoring research, not everything we're gonna be doing.
Oh.
characterize regional, off-front, public, private.
But then we can.
Okay, so maybe,
Second.
yeah, the whole push on, again, like this forest management piece inside the California Water Plan was like, we don't know very much about it, so here's a lot of research we want you to do. So we kind of mimicked that, but we started to get into it on number 4 and number 3, we started specifying things that we want to see. Okay, so I don't know if this covers the fire part.
I think we wanna be more proactive than just doing research though.
Yeah, we do, but this is the research section. This is
Yeah,
the monitoring
it
and
makes sense.
research section. We wanted to cover what we wanted to cover and get that out of the way, in effect.
Well, and yet, you know, they didn't have a whole lot on just actions, right? They said, yeah, they have agreements, they don't have something on that. You know, that's what I'm saying, that, you know, this is our chance, if we wanna get some action words in here, we would put it under economic incentives, research connection between. How about integrated research and projects? If we did that right up at the front, so, you know, it says provide economic incentives for integrated research and, for research and
It's
projects.
kind of a catch-all.
Yeah, and then everything under it follows. Should I just do that? What do you guys think?
Well, a lot of the research is done though, right? I mean, we're stuck in this loop where the research, the Forest Service is known for 50 years that we get positive, you know, fuels benefits from prescribed fire. Why do we need to keep researching?
Because this is new news to the California Water Plan. And this is gonna go to, you know, a lot of the forest people talk about themselves. A lot of other people will read the California Water Plan for a lot of reasons. It's our chance to educate back. That's why, just because we know it doesn't mean anybody else knows it. And so, that's why in a lot of ways we're supporting some of this stuff that everybody already knows, we already know, but the California Water Plan doesn't know that. All right, so,
Well, we should call it research management strategies then. The resource management, it's like,
research and projects. I think if we just add projects, then, you know, we'll be pushing. So where I would suggest you add it is right at the front here. Provide economic incentives for research and projects on connections between forest management and restoring blah, blah, blah. And all those things under it go under that. Is that good enough, or do you guys want something else?
I'm okay with that.
Okay?
I've been lost where we are in the bigger picture.
You want to get stuff done? Sure.
Going back to the previous slide, Leah,
Okay.
there's a, no, there's a arrow down there. There's a little arrow.
No, I did it.
So, Leah, I'd also like to see something on biomass solutions addressed in the economic incentives page, that first one we were talking about.
Yeah, that's gonna be when we get to it,
Okay.
okay?
Again, this is still research.
We're still on the first page of this thing. Okay, what did you want, Randy?
Well, you know, what I'm looking at here
I didn't
is,
see it on the slide.
you know, I'm kind of keying off what John was talking about. Additional street gauges, additional precipitation stations, water quality and sediment monitoring stations. I have a feeling, John, you worked on this, right? So, long-term monitoring wells, and aquifer infiltration. We're just trying to get people kind of what's going on here, just into the discussion.
Well, this RMS 22 is broadly the forest management section. So we'll have everything under the sun here. But the first thing under the sun is research, is moving the research agenda down the road. And these first two items are to do that, economic incentives for it in general, and then economic incentives that specifically go to the water connection. And then we get into a broader discussion on overall coordination and its role in forest management. Leah, is that accurate?
Yeah, but going back to this first bullet, provide economic incentives for monitoring and research to inform projects, right? To inform project design and implementation. I mean, if we're trying to get some action in there, we could add that to it.
Well, I think just researching projects, like, let's take the Jay's Meadow project, for example. It's, you know, it's not just a theory, and it's not just a research project, it's actually going out and doing things that affect the hydrograph. So it falls into the second piece. This may be an organizational issue we're dealing with in terms of how this report comes across when people read it. Oftentimes, research and monitoring are put at the tail end once you tell everybody what you want to do in terms of the projects. And that might be how we ought to reorganize this,
Well, that's,
this
you know,
section, so people won't get hung up on a particular, and I get hung up too, on a particular piece of verbiage being put up front. We don't have to cover everything all at the beginning. Our goals for management coordination in the forest.
Do you have anything on paired watershed studies? Like a
Not-
long-term paired watershed study?
Not that,
That seems to be a gap when when we try to take this out on the
It
road.
says gauges would be helpful in both managed and pristine watersheds. It's
Oh, yeah.
similar to, but not the same as a managed watershed study.
so Mike De La Soe wanted to add quotes around pristine, because he hasn't seen one yet,
Yeah.
which is fine.
What does
I
that mean?
forgot to do that.
There's no such thing.
Okay, and so,
So does that address the, like, we're kind of pushing for groundwater storage in meadows and forests, does that apply to that? Is that sentence in natural and pristine areas?
managed, and he just said put it in quotes, because it is defined differently by anybody that looks at it. So that's what, unless you want me to change that word, that's all I was gonna do, is put the quotes around pristine.
Was that your question, Mark? Well, I just want to make sure that there's, because it's something that we're really pushing for, just to make sure that there's areas of water quantification and quality are being able to be measured.
Yeah, number 4 was trying to get at that.
Okay.
Additional monitoring wells and aquifer and isotope and recharge studies.
Yeah, I kind of like the both managed and pristine watersheds, and number 4 kind of touched on it, it seems like, and I don't know if we need to be more explicit or if that's adequate.
Well, if you have suggestions, this is definitely the time to make them, you know? And, you know, not that we're not gonna circle back, but if you can think of something that we would add that would make it a little clearer. Now, going back to this title, provide economic incentives for monitoring and research for project design and implementation. I was gonna add that to it. Is that okay with you guys? Just get at the action part? And then all the details are underneath, but we keep saying this is for the purpose of projects, right? Is that what I'm hearing you guys say you want to have in here, more action?
You also have a number 5 under there that's not showing on the screen, but is on the,
Yeah, there's a handout that has these.
It says additional projects and studies to characterize regional surface water, groundwater, and aquifer interactions on public, private, and tribal lands.
So does
I
that,
think that captures it.
Go to the next slide.
okay, so, all right, so now on to this one, what we did on this one is we added projects to the title here, provide economic sense for research and projects on connections between forest management and restoring the surface and water hydrograph and forested landscapes, and additional research on, and then we have this list. And this was pretty much from the California Water Plan, but anytime that you see groundwater, we stuck it in there. You know, because this is what, the number one thing that we were hearing from you guys is we wanted to get groundwater into this picture instead of just water quality and surface water. And the other thing we added, because there's all this, you know, argument about, you know, all fire is good or all fire is bad. So we added, the chairs were really interested in adding this number 4, effects of different severity wildfires. So we can say, you know, it's not so black and white, there's lots of different kinds of fire, and how do we incorporate that into this? And we added the flood peaks, that not only is groundwater storage good for droughts, it's good for floods, because if you can just shave the top off of that peak, you're not spilling Oroville. So, you know, it's those kinds of things that we added. And then we added, that number 6 was something else that the chairs added.
Just for the Butte County people, we've come to the conclusion around here that in 1997, with the flood, if we had been doing the proper job of thinning and making the meadows more resilient, then we wouldn't have had to dump Oroville when it happened, what had happened.
And it wouldn't have been
But
everybody.
that's
It was a
true
7%,
or not,
we had a
that's-
modeler do it, and we have a lot of big meadows on the east side, you know, not so much on this side. But he took one, the Last Chance Meadow, which is the biggest one outside of Sierra Valley in our drainage, and he calculated, he's a pretty respectable guy, so when he says that, everybody goes, okay, that, you know, it would have knocked, if we had restored that meadow, it would have knocked 7% off that peak. Not just the peak, not, you know, once this place is saturated, it's saturated, but that little peak would have been the difference between going into an evacuation mode in Oroville and not. And we were calling down to DWR going, do you know that we are at 100% saturation, every drop is gonna run off, and are you ready for this? We were calling down to operations in Oroville going, are you ready for what's coming your way, because we're done. And they're like, what are you talking about? We're looking at our gauges, I go, it's not the wave that you're gonna get, you know, so that's why we're trying to get some of these things in here, because what's obvious to us is really obvious to people that would read forest management in a California water plan for the first time. And kind of go, what's forest got to do with water? I mean, that's where everybody kind of is.
So, under this topic, these, we're kind of going down through them. You go to the next slide. Were these all from the California Water Plan, or were there?
I didn't go to, I looked at the other, like in floodplains and meadows and there was a lot of other good stuff in the other plans. Since most of the other plans were done when the forest management piece came in, there wasn't that much, you know, do with management and forest, well, you know.
So go to the next slide.
Okay. So now we're kind of honing in on different kinds of forests. By urban trees, we mean trees in Quincy. Okay, so it's not a big part of our landscape, but it's a big part of other people's landscape, so we thought we'd stick it in there. We did number 7, the chairs, you know, worked over the riparian forest piece, and they also did number 9.
That's where I was getting to, 9
And
and 10.
9 and 10 and 11 were ones that our chairs added that were not in the California Water Plan. And it gets at this different kind of fires and what are they doing and what kind of water system have you set up. And then also, if you don't do anything, what kind of water system are you setting up?
I think on 9, you might want to put in something about the timing of flows. So just changes in hydrology.
On the volume and timing of stream flows?
Yeah.
Okay.
Would acknowledging post-fire management
was a big thing that we identified earlier in our work as one of our major objectives, but it's, you're right, it's not in here.
But it's something we're currently still dealing with from '08.
Okay, so let me add a number 12 onto this section, and can you give me some ideas?
It kind of, just because it deals with also, kind of fits in with the greenhouse gas and goals and carbon sequestration as part of that, getting out the dead wood. And there still stands forests that are standing dead down there that we're still working on, in addition to the magnitude that are on the ground, in and around our water system. So, I don't know if it's just adding in even kind of a post-fire or after-fire events for
So-
like a management projects for something like that around the waterways.
So, prioritize, develop post-fire management projects that do what?
Well, they,
Do we have to say
Is it-
what?
I know, it's
I don't know.
major cleanup on all levels.
Just management strategy.
It put us into
Yeah.
biomass
Yeah, I think I'd leave it
utilization.
general.
Okay, so develop post-fire management.
It's part of
Management strategy.
rehabilitation,
Yeah,
it's part of restoration,
It's also public safety risk because of, people are hiking or
Trees fall.
recreating. And then, the next wildfire that comes through there, we've got trees that are gonna fall in the web.
well, you're setting up for a new fire that will be they can't even fight, which, yeah.
Chips, we couldn't find chips
With the
because
kind
of
of
story.
tree and debris that would be on the ground is an overwhelming, maybe very unnatural amount, and that,
All right,
But
develop,
there's some people that like that, so, we gotta
that's okay, that's
put
what
our
we want.
flag in the ground.
There's woodpeckers that like it too.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Bugs and woodpeckers.
And they just move from one fire to the other.
Okay,
Good
so
flocks.
develop post-fire rehabilitation and restoration strategies for forest health and public safety?
forest health, public safety, water quality, or water quality, right, oops. But
Carbon
part of
sequestration.
the carbon sequestration. the
Okay, how
reforestation.
about another modifier? How about timely?
Oh, yes.
Develop
Yeah, that would
timely.
be good.
Yay, John,
Not
that's
20 to
right.
5 years down the line.
Okay,
Yeah.
develop timely
Peter
post-fire rehabilitation and restoration strategies for forest health, carbon what, carbon,
Or the carbon sequestration.
Well, it's more than sequestration because those trees are emitting carbon if you
yeah,
don't
for
get it out.
carbon,
Carbon
for
management.
GHG reduction?
There you go.
Okay,
GHG reduction, yeah.
okay,
So that includes methane, 10 years.
okay,
Also.
GHG, and
About
we said,
100 years.
and public, and public safety, right?
Water quality and public safety.
Okay.
And also, when you have catastrophic wildfires like that, the tree roots after about 8 to 12 years decay, and then that's when you have more erosion. So you could actually add erosion in as well.
It affects the soil qualities and sedimentation.
Okay,
Lot involved aftermath.
all right, great, thanks.
We should do a video of the Tobin water system, how it's deteriorated since the 2008.
All right, now,
Well, this year 20 trees came down, this year the big boulders came down, this year the more trees came down. It's like a ongoing disaster.
okay, well, all right, so I've got that one, and now we're, if
Blackbird's
that's
like-
enough on that, we're into like coordination, like how do we do this?
Sorry.
So the first thing is invest in actions, which everybody wanted to do, the action piece. I gotta go on the next page, right? Invest in actions, okay, so we got the action piece. Involvement of forest managers, here you guys are, okay, so you all signed in, right? And then, invest in science, pilot interagency agreements, again. We added the tribal stuff, of course it wasn't there. Anything that has tribes, we added, because it wasn't in the California Wetlands, so. And then there's this piece about the public education campaign, all this, Central Valley, Bay Area, Southern California. Which,
Which is not necessarily what
well, it was in there. But, we didn't have an implementing entity like the Conservancy to help us do that. So, you know, maybe we wanna call out the conservancy.
Yeah.
You like that idea? Okay. So we could say, invest in science-based education coordinated with the Sierra Nevada Conservancy?
And others.
Yeah, I would say yeah, you want to kind of leave it a little broad.
Okay, with
Just
the-
one,
Yeah, I'd rather have the Metropolitan Water District pay for it than the Sierra Nevada Conservancy.
No, they're gonna help us. And others. Okay, if I'm reading this right. Invest in a science-based publication education campaign with the Sierra Nevada Conservancy and others directed at, right? So we're just partners in this, right? Does that make sense?
This is number 5, you're going.
Yeah. Wordsmithing.
Into its own
9 o'clock in the
paragraph.
morning, it's really.
No, we have a whole day.
Yeah, no, we're gonna get through this, okay?
We can't pay for education projects.
You can't
But
pay,
we
you can help support
We
them.
can help in lots of other ways.
Well, you can provide money that would be leverage money for other funding sources.
Yeah, we're saying we're working with you to get this to
Right.
happen, all right? Okay, is that good enough for you guys? Okay, conservation, okay, do we wanna say in this coordination, is this where we wanna get the fire liability or reduce liability barriers to the reintroduction of,
Yeah, this is where it should appear, I think.
it should appear like, okay, we've got in 6 and 7 are like, we invest in conservation measures and forestry, and we increase the eligibility of federal agencies partners. Do we need another bullet here about work with federal and state agencies to reduce liabilities and barriers for landscape scale burning, something like that?
Yeah, but throw private in there too, because it's insurance companies as well,
Okay, so,
and not to mention
it's a good idea though.
forest managers.
That's one of the biggest
I
issues.
don't know if that's ever gonna happen, but it's.
well, we gotta put it
Talk
in there,
about it.
right? You
Yeah.
know?
We do.
Can you restate that sentence?
yeah.
I'm working on it.
We'll
Work
get it
with
right.
federal, state, local agencies, and private entities, right? Okay, to reduce liabilities and barriers to broad landscape burning, right? To reduce liabilities and barriers,
Is that managed burning?
To manage burning,
to
Man,
manage
Manage
prescribed
burning.
fire.
managed,
We
Burning.
will, but we're having a broader look at prescribed fire plus.
yeah, cause somebody
Makes
from,
well-
Well, it would help facilitate projects.
But ideally, someone like Collins Pine could let fires burn on their land that were started by lightning and achieving benefits. Now, why does that only need to be for the Forest Service to do? Not
No, we
saying
have
that we need
private.
to do that tomorrow, Jay, but
We have
reduce
private.
liabilities and barriers to manage burning and to create incentives for managed burning, or is that just too long?
remove barriers,
Barriers to manage burning.
The incentives to manage burning should go back on the ecosystem restoration page, the first one.
We'll review.
We kinda did it, let me, I'll go back and, did we do it well enough? Develop ecologically sound, low-intensity prescribed fire burning management strategies. We develop, providing economic incentives to develop, we should say, and implement, right? Okay, then we would get it, right, Rachel?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Now I have to read my own writing, that's gonna be a big challenge. Okay, so, all right, let's see, where are we? Deregulate non-risk commercial vegetation fuels management projects and have net beneficial to groundwater storage, blah, blah, blah. Is everybody okay with number 8?
lot of words to wordsmith in a meeting like this.
I know,
Yeah,
I'm
good.
sorry, this is like brutal, but.
Not as bad as goals and objectives.
Okay, so you know what, I skipped one. Uh-oh, I have to go backwards, Randy.
Well, you've got a handout, in your handout. there's
All right,
a
can we
dash.
do land use managed so I don't have to flip my computer back or it'll go blank? You wanna say over here?
No.
All right, so land use and management is like pretty straightforward out of the California Water Plan. And, yeah, we didn't really change that all. We called out springs and we added alluvial fans to things that you direct development away from. And then, that was it. So, land use and planning is okay the way it is. We'll move on to the one that I completely forgot, which is sediment management. So last call on land use planning and management, is that okay as proposed? It just flipped it, Randy. Okay, all right, now this is the one that I forgot. You know, I'll tell you why I forgot it. I read it in the California Water Plan. It was all about dredging reservoirs and not having all the soil go down, you know, I mean, it was just a whole thing that didn't have anything to do with this. And then I forgot about it completely. So then I had to go back when Uma called me at 8 last night and go, you missed sediment management. I was like, oh. So I pulled this out of the California Water Plan verbatim, but then listening to the conversation and this morning, I kind of went, we forgot another bullet. So if you guys want to see if this is okay, it's of course really wordy, it's the California Water Plan. Then we'll go on to what I thought we should add, but I didn't think of it till this morning. And it's something about, when you have, it was that post-burn thing, that when you have post-burn assessment and action should include, sediment and erosion remediation, something like that.
Well, it does.
It does, but it's not all landscape scale, like all this is like, we ought to do this and sediment is everywhere and we ought to get together and manage this stuff. But when you start a fire in a watershed, you set up a whole nother process, right? A big fire with sediment and erosion, so I just wanted to hit that post-burn thing, but.
My experience in firefighting, I was part of the bear teams, they co-in, and we did a lot of that, what you were just talking about, when I was running hand crews. And so that might be a place that's already written for you. It's in the bear guidelines they use for the post fires.
I'll buy that in the short term, but I don't think the bear groups are charged with looking at the broad 20 years down the road, what's the effect of this fire gonna be?
I was just wondering, that was my only input, was experience with them. They've already got it as just another resource to
Should we,
look
we
for.
ought to call that out, should we call out bear particular?
You can, I mean, they do.
But bear type is what we're looking for, because the CDF doesn't have a analogous kind of operation going on. It's a Forest Service moniker, so we should say bear type.
Yeah, because most of this was on the whole watershed scale, so that's what I was kind of going, post-burn assessments and actions on all lands, on public and private lands, or how, I don't want to get everybody into more regulatory obligations, but I do want to say that this is our chance to look at sediment and erosion on the watershed scale
Right,
when
and
they do
CAL FIRE really
cumulative
doesn't
effects.
do bear very much, they do suppression repair, but they don't do bear type. You know, Forest Service, the bear program's really to look at threats to things like urban water supply, or places you're gonna have landslides that threaten human health, but they're not, bear's not really looking at a whole watershed and saying, we need to, you know, contour fall timber on 10,000 acres. They're saying, where are the places in the fire that you're gonna have a landslide that threatens an elementary school, or where you're gonna have culverts that flood.
So, post-burn assessment and action should include sediment, and, because this is about sediment and erosion, remediation at a watershed scale, something like that?
Local and watershed.
Okay. Is that right, Ryan?
Which Ryan?
This Ryan. that good enough?
It's not my, it wouldn't be my favorite thing to see in there.
Okay, so,
Because
all right.
like you just said, I don't wanna throw a bunch
And
more
yeah, I know,
regulation,
I
and that
know.
screams a bunch more regulation to me.
Okay, so post-burn assessment act should include sediment and erosion remediation. We could just leave it at that, right? Is that good enough? Is that- You beat me. Okay, are we done with this one? We're getting there, you guys.
We're not done with it in the long term, but it's a start at dealing with the language. We
Is
have
there
to get-
something you would like to add,
Not
Mr.
at this point.
All right.
You wanna take another look
Anybody
at it
else?
before it's.
Yeah,
All you guys in the back room, I can't see over my shoulder. You, yes,
I apologize for going in reverse for just a second.
please, as long as Randy
Something's
keeps
bugging me
moving the
here.
thing back.
Under the coordination, number 8, deregulate low-risk, non-commercial vegetation management projects.
Wait a minute. Getting
The
it.
non-commercial part
Yeah.
is irritating me because a lot of these projects hopefully could generate chips or, a commercial product. And
I would just remove non-commercial.
I would too.
Okay, so where are we? Forest
Number
management
8,
under,
deregulate
Slide
low-risk,
before.
Previous
non-commercial.
page, the end of the previous page.
The very end of forest management.
Bottom of 5.
Page
oh, okay. Deregulate what?
Get rid of non-commercial.
Just take non-commercial out.
Okay. Deregulate low-risk vegetation and management projects.
There you
Blah, blah. Okay, thank you.
How are we going to deregulate? Do we have the authority to deregulate, and what does that mean?
No, but this is our recommendations. This was in the California Water Plan, okay? So if they wanna put it on there,
Streamline.
Yeah, I thought deregulate suggests that we're going above CEQA, and I'm not sure what that means, I guess, I don't get it.
okay, so would you, no, that's great. So would
Streamline
you
regulation.
streamline?
Yeah.
So instead of deregulate, streamline.
Streamline, well, that's streamline permitting for low risk? Cause I mean, this is about,
I think you would just say streamline and leave it open.
okay. Great, thanks you guys. All right, I'm going forward. I can't go backwards. All right, so we have to go forward. Okay, sediment management, we beat that one to death. Okay, next one is watershed management. This was pretty
Well,
straightforward.
on sediment management, I had a question.
Ugh, I don't have to go
It's just
back.
a question, it's not a change. Is it currently called the Natural Resources Agency? Because that's changed than what it used to be called, which was the Resources Agency.
I think it is the natural.
I think it's in it just because, again, urban people might not know what resources mean. It's the way it's written. If you wanna change it,
I think it has changed to be the natural resources agency.
That's what I've heard. Sort of like the change that Congress made back and forth on that Resources Committee or the Natural Resources Committee. It's sort of, who's upset about it being there or not being there at any one time for political reasons. Moving on.
okay, watershed management. Okay, all you people behind me, you got any comments?
I'll move. I just like the straight shot of the screen.
Anybody else? It's pretty straightforward. Did we even mess with this? We added catastrophic fire, of course.
Oh, thank you.
And Mike so added the last bullet, assisting property owners in implementing watershed management activities.
But that's okay.
That's fine. Mike and John, actually. Okay, so is that one all right as written?
We got something in there about landscape scale prescribed burning
I wish it was
No,
a little more
we do not.
or natural fire.
All right, so do we want another bullet here?
My concern is, there's all this stuff about science and, but tribes are trying to integrate traditional ecology into the system. But I recognize that not all areas will have tribal participation. But in our area, I would love to have, TEK, tracking and reporting methods developed also.
That's great. To develop. Well, wait,
To
scientific.
integrate, it sounds like what she's saying.
To create and maintain scientifically valid and TEK tracking?
Or just a different bullet,
Okay,
Different bullet.
all right,
because it's hard to integrate those two.
yeah. to develop, okay, Trina, you're on.
To develop, pretty much the same traditional ecological knowledge or traditional knowledge on tracking and reporting methods
Okay,
for the same purposes. Yeah,
How about just provide economic incentives to integrate TEK with land management in general?
But she's trying to get to the tracking mechanisms which currently don't exist
right.
to the extent necessary for any regulator to use them. And that's what we're trying to develop, something that we can, not just philosophically state, but more practically state. We're gonna use a particular tool to track that.
Yeah, and the way that tribes do that is going to be different than the way that science do it, and it's a very valid approach to.
so I've got an idea, we'll put this one first.
for-
And then we'll get into all the other science stuff, right? Okay, so this one will be first, but then we have a fire bullet, so what should we say here?
I think provide economic incentives to scale up the use of prescribed and naturally ignited fire to achieve watershed management benefits. So it seems like we're getting hung up with this, we'll put in a fuel break and then 15 years later it's not usable anymore, but in the meantime, we could be burning off of it or using it to manage backcountry fires.
We're talking about restoration and or enhancement of watersheds through the use of prescribed or natural fire.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the one concern I would have with that, and I don't know, maybe you guys, is no amount of economic incentive is gonna get that going. You
Because
have
of
to go back to the liability.
Yeah.
Solve that problem first.
That's true, that's true.
I mean, you can't give us enough money.
No,
Right.
we don't wanna touch it with it.
I mean, Jay, I don't know how you, yeah, you gotta go back and deal with the liability.
Yeah.
So remove, it's a removing
Yeah,
that
it's a
barrier.
remove liability thing.
So we could just
Right.
restate that earlier one that we said, right? Provide economic incentives to remove barriers to scaling up, right? We could just add to remove barriers to scaling up the use of, right?
Sure.
Does that get it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, what about you guys over here on the right side?
Sounds
of the-
good.
Okay. Is nobody behind me anymore? Okay. All right, we got that one? Okay, economic incentives. Now, we put economic incentives in everything, but this is where we kind of hone in on, I think what you were bringing up earlier, Rachel, oops, which is, the biomass, the infrastructure, right? The
Yeah,
biomass
we-
utilization.
Just enhancing the economic viability of biomass solutions or something. I think that's not stated enough in this.
Okay, so does number one get it for you?
Number, oh, sorry.
On RMS 27, economic incentives?
Oh, that's the one place that it's listed in here.
Programs
Correct.
for supporting biomass utilization.
Right.
Yeah.
It's sort of, we wanted to separate out economic incentives from everything else because even though they're present in everything else, we want to make sure that they get highlighted and the real issues come down. So this issue, for example, of liability maybe ought to appear in here also. Assuming Rachel likes the way that that's characterized in number one, unless you want to add to it.
I don't know, I'll have to think about that. Adding to it, and so this, I'm just understanding these RMSs, is this under just forest management, or is this a broad economic incentives?
One, we, economic, RMS 27, economic incentives was one of like 31
Right.
that are in the California Water Plan. It was one that this group picked,
Okay.
and they said it was overarching, right? And
Okay,
so,
this is
so we have it in everything else, but then we pulled it out specifically for, infrastructure, some of the things that people might not think about as economic incentives. But if you want to add other economic incentives, this is our place to do
How
it.
about the liability one?
Okay, so how would you do this, John?
Just
Number
use the
4.
language we had earlier.
Yeah, repeat the liability stuff.
Okay, wait, this one back, okay, repeat, all right, I can do that. Okay, great.
Well, I guess again, you know, number 2 says develop scientific evaluations, and again, develop TPK evaluations also.
Okay, so we would repeat 2.
But get rid of scientific and put.
Okay, so number 2 is really
Well,
TEK, and then
well-
number 3 is scientific. We're gonna put TEK first. So we're making a point here. And then number 4 is assist, and number 5
What,
is.
trying to get people mad and then calm them down? Is that what you're trying to do?
No, they're gonna be going, what is this? It's the 11 times repeat. They're all like, so what is this traditional ecological knowledge? And then they see it like 6 or 7 times.
Yeah,
Hi
that's,
Terry Rez. Okay, so we were supposed to be through this by now, and also being able to, all right,
You're doing pretty good with what you're providing, so keep moving.
all right, so are we done with,
Is that the last one?
no, that's economic incentives, then we have outreach and engagement, and then 31, we got 2 more. All right, move on. Okay, outreach and engagement, this was another one of ours where I looked for guidance everywhere and didn't find anything. So what we basically made these up, John and Mike and I. So we said that there should be economic incentives for, we don't have to have IRWM projects, it's for any projects, right?
I don't understand that sentence. Could you repeat?
Well, the way it's written in number 1 is we're just asking for this for IRWM funded projects. We really want this for all projects, right?
So cross out IRWM.
So just cross out IRWM. I mean, this is an IRWM plan, but.
Didn't you guys just say though that you're not rating projects?
Well, other people provide scoring. There is scoring. I mean, there's would be scoring required in the guidelines. Okay, so it has to fit the objectives of the program, blah, 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 blah. So there is scoring, but there isn't any scoring that includes education. Education is just tack on, and maybe it's a nice fuzzy thing, but nobody provides any benefits in terms of
I don't think
competitive.
we need scoring, I'd scratch scoring.
Okay, just say provide economic incentives,
What about support?
provide support.
Is that broad enough?
Yeah.
Being intrusive?
Support
So-
projects that incorporate outreach and education.
Yeah.
Keep it simple.
Dump scoring.
Okay, so provide support for projects?
He's saying just support projects that
Oh,
incorporate.
okay. Oh, how, this is, okay. Great, okay, thank you, everybody. Support projects. All right, support and expand existing education programs. Do we want to call any of these other ones out?
We have a lot of good programs here, but for people in LA, they're like, well, who cares about fit and learning landscapes? They don't know about it.
Well, that's why we thought we'd say what they were.
Yeah.
Do we have any other ones? I know there's the, what's the, Mind You and Cultural Group, do they still have their
They have a summer camp.
summer camp? Should we list that one? I mean, that'll get everybody's like, what's that?
Well,
Like,
that, and the Susan Lily Indian Rancheria has, summer youth programs as well in Cradle Valley and, other places. So tribal, educational programs, because none of those touch tribal.
Right.
Learning landscapes doesn't have a tribal component. The fit,
I don't think fit does, really.
no, not really. They might have a guest speaker.
And so we would say, through junior college education and other entities.
You know, I
Forced
think
institution.
naming these things, we're just sort of, I know Mike's interested in
Yeah.
naming fit, but it's sort of like, why do we have to name anything?
Because if you're from the if you're someplace else, you may not even know that we do outdoor education, that it's important, that, you know, we believe in it. I mean, part of it is to name it and say, you know, we do a lot of it and we think it's important.
So then say such as, but not limited to.
Or examples being,
Yeah.
something like that, yeah.
Okay, so this is going into our plan. I wasn't sure if this stuff's going into our plan or it's going to the state water plan.
Okay, this is our plan, but this is where we get to kind of push back on what they said in the last California water plan and say in the next one, we have some really specific things we want you to address. I mean, this is
Such
our
as,
chance
but not
to,
limited to, and then,
Tribal education.
and get tribal education in there too.
such as, but not limited. Okay. And that's why, when we couldn't find anything on education, I thought it's time to push back
Yeah.
to tribal,
Education
to
program.
tribal, summer, or just
No,
education?
educational programs. Because some of them are year-round.
Okay, so we're gonna put that right in front, such as, but not limited to tribal education programs, training for teachers, learning landscapes. Okay, does that cover it?
Can we talk about support for collaborative groups? Because there are several, like the Feather River Watershed Roundtable Group is talking about doing mass collaborative monitoring. And there's several others, I think they should be recognized and supported.
So you would add a, number 4, support work by collaborative,
By local collaborative.
support work by local.
I think that's how a lot of work is gonna get done.
Or not.
And we just say support work by local collaboratives and just leave it at that?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, number 4, any other comments on this one? We're down to the last one, you guys.
Now, just for the sake of reference, these last ones are really the strategy. This is the overriding strategy of how we're gonna approach the landscape.
So, yeah,
Each of these,
well, you know, what the California Water had plan was water bag transport, let me just, who were the goofy ones that were in there? They were just like way goofy, right?
I like the snow fences idea.
Okay, so, anyway, so what we did early on at our group is we're not gonna try and say none of these matter and not say anything. This is our chance to really hone in on what kind of strategies we really think are our fuels and fire management strategies. Now, again, we don't have reintroducing fire in there, but we have this list that we went through, right? Up until now, so this is our list unless we wanna add something. But we are,
Add the T at the beginning, the
oh,
first word.
okay, thank you.
It's there.
And somebody's watching these details. All right, do we wanna add one? Is this good enough?
there's some sheet uploads too that are covered.
See, this is where you see the wildland interfaces management strategy. We added one, which was, again, if you thin around these domestic wells and some of those, you can help secure water supplies in droughts. So we added that one, and then we went landscape scale, because that's where the Forest Service is headed. But we don't have a fire one, and we don't have anything that really says specifically anything about TEK, so.
Right. So I was wondering if TEK was addressed well enough already, or
It's
needs to be added here.
So, rather than have you reiterate what we've already done from a wording standpoint, why don't you just make sure that those 2 additional bullets are added to because there's enough language developed previously in this effort this morning to cover the introduction of TEK as a strategy and the reintroduction of fire as a strategy.
You have those two now.
All right, you guys are trusting me.
I don't really like the word fire buffers. It seems kind of like, it's too broad. It's like, does that mean we're gonna clear cut all the ridges, a mile either side? Like, I think we could say make it a little bit more descriptive, using 3 words instead of 2 or something, like strategic fuel reduction or something like that. But fire buffers, it's like, what's that?
Does that mean fuel breaks? Is that a fuel break?
The fuel breaks is kind of a loaded word, like.
Well, that's why I was just at the liability word, so whatever you wanna add around it's fine, but you know,
No,
this is
we're on
where.
one, aren't we?
1 and 2.
Yeah.
1 and 2?
Oh, we're on one and two?
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you guys,
You know,
Strategic fuel reduction instead of.
or
fire
fuels
buffers?
management or something that,
well,
Is a buffer just a treated area, is that what that is?
well, that's where we were kinda going, it could be different places, different things in different places. It could be burn, you know, a burning open area, it could be thinning. That's why we just said buffers. We didn't start prescribing what they were gonna look like. We just said that that's one of the places where we need to really focus doing fire and fuels management, whatever that looks like. We didn't really try and specify, cause if we get into prescriptions, then we're gonna have this big
So
pushback
then
on.
why don't say fire and fuels management and get rid of buffers?
yeah.
This is the reverse.
Yeah, because
Reduce the words.
Buffer has different meanings, and
Yeah.
I like that better.
Buffer,
Okay.
yeah, 'cause
So-
buffers could be,
Fire and fuels management for ridgeline,
Okay, all right, so we'll add that in here for this one and that in here for number 2, okay. And then on number 4, what do you wanna say?
I don't know why we need to elaborate.
Wildfire liability,
It's the same thing we talked about before, reducing the liability,
There's
right?
something really specific that's going on that topic is the Northern California Prescribed Fire Council is trying to advance legislation that already exists in the southern states that protect landowners from escape burns as long as there's not gross negligence.
okay. Well, without getting into too much in the weeds, is this,
so you
we're
like the
gonna
word?
add 8 and we're gonna add 9. 8 is TEK and 9 is reintroducing more natural fire regimes, right?
So what are we gonna do with 4?
I don't know.
Again, I don't know why we need to do anything.
Well, I'm thinking we don't do anything on 4.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And guess
Can I-
what?
Can I add
We're
one more
done.
too? Can we add another biomass one on this end piece? We just like develop local solutions for biomass utilization. Can we put that on there?
Develop what?
Local
For biomass utilization,
Why local?
because I think we should. We should support our local economy. I
Why
guess
not
it doesn't
just-
have to be local.
Yeah, like if the PUC were to say, okay, we like biomass now. That's a statewide
Okay,
thing, so.
so then just develop solutions.
Develop. Develop what? Develop biomass utilization?
Solutions for biomass utilization.
Develop solutions for biomass utilization. Okay, you guys, first thing in the morning, all this wordsmithing, congratulations.
From my experience on the other groups, they never tweaked any of the ones that we got for, very
No,
little.
yeah, you guys worked it over.
We
Rich.
worked it over pretty good.
Okay, so next up is the presentations for the fire safe council. Do you have thumb drives, or how do you wanna do this, or,
I brought a little presentation on the drive.
okay? So do we,
Put it on here.
that'd be great, as long as you can save it so we can have them. Did you guys, are you gonna do a verbal, or did you bring something? Ah, okay.
Our computer didn't like the boss and wouldn't let her do anything yesterday,
Okay.
so we weren't able to do a presentation on the computer.
The projector, still pink screen.
It's still pink screening and the new bulb, and even at the board meeting, she couldn't get it to work to just do the basics, so it doesn't like her.
Sounds like a new
Poor
projector.
cow.
Well, that's kind of where we're hinting that she should go. Yeah, it's just scroll down just a little bit. Right there.
Alright. I was gonna let the guests go first, if you had fun. There you go.
Sure.
Alright.
Yeah, you're up.
Yeah. You stood up. You vote.
Well, hello everyone. Glad to be here. My name is Nils Lunder. I work as the coordinator for the Plumas County Fire Safe Council. And full disclosure, Deer Creek Resources has a contract with Plumas County Fire Safe Council to provide the coordination Zeke Lunder is my brother. Here we are. Anyway, so I have just a brief presentation overview of what our organization does and what's happened in the past, what's happening in the present, and what might happen in the future. I'm going to just start with our mission statement. Pretty much in all the work I do, I refer to the mission every day. I think about, what is the mission statement and how can I apply that to my work and how do I use that to prioritize the work I'm doing from day to day. To reduce the loss of natural and human-made resources caused by wildfire through fire-wise community programs and pre-fire activities. Anyway, so that's our mantra. And I like to put that on our agenda. I like to put that on whatever I can to remind myself what really the priority is and then also others. So in general, this council's been around for quite some time. John Sheehan was involved heavily for a long time. I believe it's at least 11, 12 years it's been happening.
Kind of inbred around here.
1998.
1998 is when they first started, and then they incorporated in 2002 or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, they've been doing a lot for a long time, and we've got a lot to show for our efforts. I came on almost 2 years ago. But in general, we rely on grant funds for not only the coordination, but for the implementation of this work. And those grant funds come from a variety of sources. It's quite a competition, and it's quite a puzzle. Each project's a little different. We work with willing landowners and their neighbors to develop projects here in the county. And today we've treated over 4,500 acres of private lands, which is a lot of land. And especially, a lot of these are in really strategic areas in the WUI. Almost all of our work's in the WUI. We have been recently helping communities develop independent community wildfire protection plans. In general, we've been reliant on a community wildfire protection plan for the whole county. So our organization developed a CWPP for the whole county, and then it's been updated. So in general, that's kind of the umbrella. But we have a number of communities that are moving in the direction where they want their own CWPP because they feel like that'll help them empower themselves to kind of develop their own strategy and prioritize. And then that might give them a little more flexibility in fundraising. So we have 2 of those happening right now, and that's been quite an interesting process. We also do a bunch of Firewise community assessments, and we support local communities to become Firewise. Last year we had 4, and at the end of this year we'll be in line to have about 10. So we're really expanding that effort, and both the CWPP and the Firewise efforts are really, they're opportunities for us to get to know more people in the community and to really build our network. And from my experience here, we really aren't effective without a network. So a lot of my job is networking and trying to figure out how to leverage certain people's enthusiasm and their own community network to actually get to the scale where we need to be to develop projects. So in the days before I came on, like I said, I've only been around for a couple years, there was a lot more commercial material that was generated from our projects. And since I came on, we haven't had any at all. So I kind of feel like I'd like to learn more about how that worked. And I feel like that's really the model that we need to get to. Because currently, we're just so reliant on these grant funds. And then also, our treatment costs, as I will mention later, they keep going up every year. So if we have a limited amount of grant funds coming in, then we're going to have a declining amount of acres we can treat each year. And there's a lot of people who are competing for these limited funds. So obviously, we have plenty of fuel out there, and we have plenty of material. So I'd like to see more of these kind of projects where we have the commercial components, but I haven't been able to get that happening in my time here. But in the past, yeah, we would sell chips locally, we would sell logs, and landowners would agree to donate their material to offset our costs. So all the funds that were generated from the sale of these materials were then used to treat more acres within the project. So then if we had a $100,000 grant, but we had $150,000 of merchantable material, then we could treat a lot more land.
So you're not merchandising any material now in your treatments?
Well, none of the ones I've been involved with, no.
Why, is it because there's no merchantable material, or?
Well, that might be part of it, but I think a lot of it is there's not a lot of logs, and then a lot of it's just these little spindly trees, and there's no one accepting or buying that material locally.
Well, I could see that in the chips, but I don't know, understand the lack of the law creation.
We haven't developed any projects lately that have a diameter limit over 9 or 11 inches.
Oh, okay.
That's just been the standard guideline that we've been using for a while.
Were part of the projects back at that time, part of the Quincy Library Group projects that you guys were doing?
No, they
or-
were oftentimes coordinated in a geographic sense, but they were private lands project where the beforehand arrangements were made with the electric generator and the mill to take material. And also we didn't have these stupid standards like you just talked about that limit what is commercially viable.
What kind of standards are those? This is
Well,
perplexing to
let me give you an example. There was really strong prohibitions at the state level of using any state money for merchantable stuff. So when our current congressman, Doug LaMalfa, was in the state legislature, I think you remember this, they got something called the LaMalfa bill passed, and the deal that they cut was, I think, 16-inch maximum.
It was the first exemption from thinning.
Right,
Doug
right,
Malfa's
right.
bill.
Exactly, so that enabled us to at least get those kind of trees.
It was 18 inches, I think.
18, okay. And then on other projects, there were no requirements whatsoever, like on projects we did with Soper or with Collins, where really it was whatever we could sell, we would sell. And wherever we could take the chips and get money to take the chips, we'd do that. So the chip market died first, and then the propensity has been for the other grant programs to have greater and greater restrictions on the type of material that you can get out. So it just lessened the amount of money. But the ratio that you gave there is not an inappropriate ratio. It was often $2 from commercial efforts, $1 in grant funds, and we move on to the next project. And you could do 3 times the acreage because of that.
The LaMalfa exemption was almost not used because it was so restrictive. Brian Dolly just recently got that upgraded. It is now 24 inches stump diameter, which is still too small, we think.
And you have, and I know because I just did one, you have to get on the ground and measure all the
Exactly.
trees that are close.
Yeah, you wear your knees
You're
out.
on your knees a lot.
Yeah, and we did one as well, right behind Chester Park. Produced a lot of chips, but it produced some saw logs too. So I don't know if you guys are looking at.
We just need to reevaluate our criteria then with the group.
Yeah, so there's a lot of dynamics that have led to this moment, right? There's a lot, but one of which is, so this organization has had a lot of variables, one of which is John Sheehan retired from Plumas Corporation. In my sense, I'm kind of piecing things together because I am learning as I go, but my sense is when that happened, some of the inertia of the organization and some of the details and the understanding of the operations have become diminished. So I came in a time where we had a lot of projects that had just been sitting for a long time. And you can fill in at any time. So anyway, so one of the things I've been doing is I've been hustling to try to get more projects going, but I haven't really been trained in how I can integrate more merchantable materials. And then a lot of my work has been trying to figure out how to take these projects where we have funding, but they've been just sitting there, and the main excuse is because biomass hasn't been demanded. So I've been trying to figure out how to get those going, because eventually those funds will go away. And my mission right now is like, how can I be effective and get some kind of movement of project going so we can spend these dollars, serve these communities, and move forward. So anyway, in the present, we basically have 2 options that we've been using. We have pile burning, and the next one we have mastication. And you guys are all familiar with these. Oh, okay, we do some chipping, but that's limited. And that becomes real cost prohibitive for us. So I'll give you just,
What becomes cost prohibitive getting the material?
chipping. And that's one of the things, so let's go to the next.
chipper, right?
We don't have a chipper.
Blowing chips out.
Obviously mastication is a very effective tool that we're using, and
like blowing chips out on the ground. is what
Just
you're
blowing,
saying,
yeah.
John.
And we only usually do that in areas where, here in Plymouth County, we have a couple air basins that are really impaired, so sometimes we can't burn. And then, say a grant's expiring, and we have piles built, all we can do is chip. So, but that'll push costs up to over $2,000 per acre. So if we're getting grant funds, and we're trying to treat as many acres as we can, and if we're paying over $2,000 an acre to a local contractor, we don't get a whole lot, because that's a lot of money. And so mastication, you know, that's a great tool as well, but depending on the time of the year, and depending on our funding and expiration of the grants, that can range from $600 an acre to $1,800 an acre, depending on slope, depending on the availability of the masticator. So we're really at the mercy of all these factors, and currently, since we don't have a robust merchantable product line of our efforts, I'm feeling like we're kind of not in a real sustainable position as a group. That's my take. And unless something changes, which I'm sure there are solutions out there, we're going to just continue finishing our projects, getting more grants, and operating in this paradigm. But I'd like to figure out ways to, if we want to really get to the next scale that everybody wants to see, we're going to have to sell more product, and we're going to have to get more funds from out of the state and federal funds. But anyway, state and federal grants, they're challenging to secure, and a lot of times there's a 50-50 match. So without merchantable product, it's really hard to get any of those that require 50-50.
Can I ask you a question, because I went to your round table where everybody brings their projects in, and a lot of times you're right up against like Soper or these, and you guys do integrated projects, right? Where there's, you know, there's a timber sale and then there's this right next to it, and you can coordinate on some of the overhead and that sort of thing. Is that one of the approaches that we ought to expand more? Because obviously what we're doing today is talking about these landscape scale approaches, and where does WUI and fire safe fit into this, right? And
Certainly, I think to whatever extent possible, if we can increase communication and take advantage of opportunities, that's really the best way to go. Yeah, and I think we were able to do that with that. So Soper had this piece of ground out by Lee Summit, and for over 10 years, Paul Violet was trying to get everything together. And basically, he had a hard time getting contractors available at the right time. He had a hard time with selling the chips because there was a bunch of biomass. And just out of the blue, like this spring, or this early 2015, there was Stoy Logging had all their equipment there, and nearby, and they had to pull off one project. SPI's large log mill was down for rebuilding, so then they were buying chips, and then there was this exemption that he was able to apply for, and like after 10 or 12 years of planning, he finally was able to pull the trigger, and they were able to do this beautiful treatment.
It's funny
And then I
how
think
the
part of
market-
that-
The market can really influence what you do, how you manage your landscape, and this year we had a big opportunity to sell small logs because SPI wasn't taking big logs. So we actually hunted down, we probably treated 600 acres of, small log thinning this year.
And then so one of the funding sources that we've been using, and we've been pretty good at getting, is through the federal government, these Stevens funds.
yeah,
And they're basically funds available through the federal government to do private land treatments adjacent to federal lands that are being treated and using prescribed fire. So it's a great tool, and I inherited 4 or 5 of these projects when I came on board, and many of those have been stalled because of this biomass situation. And we were hoping to use some of those funds on this project near Lee Summit with Soper, but they actually sold so much material that they didn't qualify for the grant because they made too much revenue. But anyway, but on that same project, right now, they're masticating right now adjacent to the project they completed using these Stevens funds, and then they're paying a portion, and the federal government's paying a portion, and we're getting a lot of beautiful work done. And it's a really nice area to do it because it's right between Highway 70, and to the north of there is Greenhorn community, and Greenhorn's a community at risk. And actually, Greenhorn's one of the communities that we're doing a CWPP with. So it was nice during the stakeholder meeting of the CWPP, we went out and saw the mastication in effect working, and it totally ties in with our Greenhorn CWPP because it's basically the Sober's closest property to Greenhorn. So basically, they've been able to treat almost all of it from this sale, and now we're doing some mastication there. And then that really just pushes the onus onto the Forest Service because they have the land between Soper and Greenhorn. Anyway, so those are some examples of some of the challenges, timing and logistics that we face as an organization. Another challenging logistics, so here's an overview map. Some of it's a little hard to see, but we have the pink shapes here. That's one project, and then all these green shapes are another project. So this is here in American Valley. We have a Stevens-funded project because there's a big fuel reduction that was done through the Forest Service, the corridor project. And right when you're coming in Highway 70 here from the Y, it's beautiful. They did a bunch of work. And then we applied for some Stevens funds to do private treatments adjacent to that. And we are basically, we're in development of actual treatment acreage. But we have landowners here. This is Radio Hill here. Radio Hill? Is that?
Yeah.
By the airport. I think that's Radio Hill, or whatever it is. By Ganser Park. Anyway, so we have private lands here that we're treating. Here's Blackhawk Road. So that's one of the projects here in American Valley. All the green here is all through, we applied for SRA funds last year, and we received a grant to do 150 acres of treatment in the WUI here in American Valley. So speaking of challenges,
Stay off the news.
yes, speaking of challenges though, but
We
we're
know
not,
that guy.
that was a good, you did a really good job. Anyway,
Do you have to buy ice cream?
this is a challenge. This project's being developed right now, but we have over 40 landowners for 150 acres. We have a lot of properties that, 1.5 acres, 0.8 of an acre. So it's great work. It totally fulfills our mission. We got funded through the SRA, which is a huge victory, really, because we had to fight. We put in, 7 proposals. We got one. So that's excellent, right? But at the same time, it's challenging. And areas that aren't going to get masticated are going to get pile burned if we're allowed to, because the Regional Air Quality Control Board, I think, there's areas in American Valley where you cannot burn piles. So that's going to be a challenge. That's going to be one of the many challenges associated with that project. And it's a fairly tight timeline. Work has to be done by March of 2017. So we have layout being completed right now. Like I said, we have over 40 properties.
There's areas where you can never burn, is that by ordinance or what?
Yeah, it's part of this. I can get you a map.
First of all, American Valley, you're really looking at Quincy and surrounding for a geographic position.
Here in East Quincy especially.
And there is, I think there's a burn ban within the defined area in Quincy, so that people can't burn their yard waste and those kinds of things.
Certainly that, yeah.
And it's been an issue.
Project burns would be out also?
I don't know, I haven't never really looked at that. I think it's an ordinance.
We've been working with Julie
It's in
Ruiz.
non-attainment, so that's triggers a whole nother thing. And
What it is.
I don't know if it's non-attainment.
I think in an attempt to get at,
To avoid
keep it.
non-attainment.
Yeah.
To do the good thing, that you don't have problems with that regulatory framework. The Quincy adopted a wood stove change-out program and this burn ban, general burn ban. But I think you could do project level burning if you cut a deal with the air quality district.
And we've been talking.
you know that,
We do.
don't you?
Yeah, NRCS has projects around here too. And our clients have been able to burn. It's just a really short window. It's super short.
And like I would say,
Like 2
I'm
weeks
not
in the
saying the whole
fall, 2
valley
weeks
is like
in
that, but I think there's some areas here in East Quincy, there's certain neighborhoods actually where they have a map with a shape file.
Right. Might
It's
be
like-
right in the neighborhood, but any of the wooded areas, because we had right on Cemetery Hill, right next to apartment complex, people have been able to. So I think it might be a little variable, but we've definitely been able to burn quite close to.
In Butte County, if you pay a little more for the special permit, you can burn on any day, almost anywhere.
That's good enough. I don't know if I built that into my budget.
It's like,
I
you
should've,
know, pay
right.
$60, $80 more for a special
In
permit.
Plymouth County, you don't have to smog your car,
I know, it's
okay?
So that's why I know, so I said.
So there is a
Butte
difference
County. There
between,
definitely can be differences, but.
I don't know if you knew that, but in Plymouth
No.
County, you don't.
Out of respect for the rest of you, I'm gonna move this thing forward. Challenges we
That's a
face.
shocker, right?
So, a big one is, I have a really hard time getting the communities to want to participate. And I put a lot of energy into just outreach and engagement. Rachel and I were at a meeting in Hamilton Branch last night. We're trying to serve residents on the East Shore. We're trying to develop a project. We sent out 242 letters to all the landowners on the East Shore. And we had 4 people at the meeting last night. We've had meetings where no one shows up, so this is one of the challenges. So if you're trying to be a community organizer and you're trying to get these great projects together, you're constrained by your lack of buy-in, right? Because we're not here to tell people what to do, we're here to try to help them, but unless they ask for help, we have no power.
Do you guys have that problem?
It's, I hate to say it, but fire gets their attention very
Yeah,
quick,
fire does.
especially when they experience what it does to their community. But I think all groups do, experience where they're hoping and wanting to see that more interest. And sometimes we don't have them coming to our meetings, but I can go into the community because I've been networking long enough to where even if they're not coming to my meetings, if I have a project or something going on in their area, since we've already been developing a relationship, my buy-in to helping have a project happen goes a lot easier.
Yeah.
So we have a pretty, I've got 98% community support when we're going out into the field to do something, but is 98% of the community coming to the meetings? No.
Proactive, it's just, it's
So
really
it's
hard.
still building, that outreach I think is still very valid and valuable to do, but yeah, it would surely be nice to see more than 4 people come.
You know, it almost comes down
it's
to,
difficult.
in every community, you need to find a maniac who really sees the problem, really has a broad sense
But 1 or
of
2 people can make
reality.
a big difference if it's the right person. You can get 50 people who don't care.
Right.
And
Do you
so
have a-
numbers don't matter, it's getting the right key people.
Do you have a neighborhood watch program in Lewis County through law enforcement?
So the gated communities.
I've seen some signs.
Because that's one of the
Seen some signs, but I
avenues
don't know
that
exactly.
I've been
Homeowner
using.
associations.
And there's, find something that was already established, and the neighborhood watch program already has that.
Well, that's what we
In
certainly
small
look for,
And
when
so
we're
I've
networking.
been promoting a fire aware portion with them to get through on that, just to spread the word, like you said, for communities. That's the only way people are listening, because I've been to some other community watches that have been trying to be formed above Paradise in the McGailey area. First meeting, 100 people showed up. Subsequent next meetings, 20. The last one, we had 3. It just, people aren't there, and so that was how we figured a way to just continually feed the information from the Fire Safe Council, and as she said, fire information, fire aware, was through those neighborhood watch programs, whether they be in the city, a town, or in the county jurisdiction.
One other piece is that the local fire departments have to be totally supported and put their people out there to help lead the effort as well. But it's, when you do this kind of work, you just get depressed sometimes because nobody cares. But then you just say, well, let's continue and work in that area where the people want to do some work, and the work will be good enough to show other people that it could be replicated in their community as well.
Well, go ahead.
Another strategy is people are saturated from going to meetings. You said they won't, if you have a project, they'll show up, but if it's another meeting, they're not gonna go. And so if you really look at maybe collaborating, with other people that are holding meetings, so it's 1 meeting instead of 10.
I agree 100%.
Well, it's not just meetings, I know who I can go to out in the community, who actually do things that support what we do, but they never show up to a meeting.
Right.
But I can go to them, I've got a lady who's still nurturing trees for us, to still plant in areas that are ready, but she doesn't come to any meetings, but that's how she still wants to help in support of things we do. So I think that your networking's valuable, and I just hope you don't get discouraged, because when they do have the fire, they will come looking for you.
Yeah, it's true.
And all of a sudden, they're happy you're there, and you're happy to there to be a response group, because it's what you guys have been doing and working towards.
And what we find is one of the main benefits for us from the FireWise program is it develops great community contacts, and then when opportunities do present themselves, we have, a group, we can be like, hey, there's this funding source that's available, are you interested, what do you need? And then we have that great connection. So little by little, we are developing a pretty solid network, and for each community that I work with, I develop a spreadsheet just of the main contacts and their names and phone numbers.
That's really cool, that's important.
Okay, questions?
Just a question, do you have any prescribed burns on the projects list?
No, we haven't touched
Nothing.
fire at all, and that's just, when I came in here, I realized that there were certain things that I should really push on, and certain things that
Yeah.
it wasn't
waste of
worth my time, personally, just because it's a big deal and there's a lot of fear.
Do you have a cost?
Even to get your grant grant readers will see your grant, and they'll look at that as a liability, and
Oh, sure,
almost could be discouraged for getting your funding.
sure. Do you have a cost per acre idea on what it would
On
cost to
prescribed fire?
burn like that?
I have no idea.
They They have costs in them.
We work with Firestorm a lot, and they probably have good information for us. I'm just gonna finish up here, but a lot of this we already touched on. So there's a scarcity of funding to do work, and we're always hustling to get funding, and we don't always get funded, right? We put out a lot of proposals, we get some small victories, right? You have to appreciate your small victories. We have no outlets for green waste, even for locally. So right now, our county's paying Waste Management a subsidy so that people can bring their non-woody green waste to the transfer station. So we have a big issue in the county, and we've been trying a whole bunch of different angles, but we really haven't made any progress with that. Powell burning logistics, not only air quality, but cost and grant timelines, and drought. So it makes it really hard to do pile burning. And so right now we're on Firestorm because they're under contract through an SNC project for us, and we already had to extend the grant just to burn the piles because the piles couldn't be burned last year because they were too green and it was dry. So that's hard. There's going to be more air quality constrictions, it feels like, so that's going to continue to make our work more challenging. Costs seem to go up every year. There's not a lot of contractors around here that bid on our jobs. So there's a limited pool, and certain times of the year, they're just not available, or they're charging $2,000 an acre to do handwork. Yeah, and then it's hard to get young people to care, and it's hard to get young people on our board. So our board, sometimes there's some apathy, or just, it would be nice to have more young folks that are at the meetings, or that are in our communities helping, but that's just not happening. Next slide, and this is the last one, it'll be brief. So I'm always looking for new opportunities, we all are. So large-scale collaboration seems like the only way to get to the pace and scale that everybody wants to see. We formed this Fed the Rivers Stewardship Coalition, which is an effort to have a new collaborative here in the region, and it's happening, but that's challenging, getting people who care about forests, who don't necessarily work in the industry. We're trying to get a broad-based coalition going, and it's just really hard to get people to come out. Public meetings are sometimes a fiasco because, put out press releases, put up flyers, and very few people show up. So that's a challenge, and maybe until we have catastrophic fire, people just won't step up. But we hope that through this effort, we can pave the way for new opportunities, right? And so we developed a big Sierra Nevada Conservancy proposal that was submitted September 1st, and with that proposal, we'd actually be taking bond funds from Prop 1 and be implementing project work on federal lands that's already under plan, that's already NEPA ready. So we made a big proposal to hopefully increase that capability of the Forest Service to do more work on their lands, because everybody knows that it's hard for them to keep up. So that's an example of some of the strategies we're looking at of how can we innovate, how can we make things happen in a way that gets us closer to our goals. We don't know about what's happening with the SRA. We are going to develop some more proposals this fall. There's a deadline in early January for another round. There's half the money in this year's round than last year, so our organization's they're a little concerned about how many proposals we submit, right? Because theoretically our proposals will be competing against themselves. So that's challenging. We hope to collaborate better with CAL FIRE. In general, it seems like politics here in Plumas County can only improve with CAL FIRE, so hopefully we can help, and hopefully we can figure out ways to take advantage of their resources and
Let me
opportunities.
jump in here, because I did work in Butte County for the planning department. CAL FIRE has a very minimal presence up here, very minimal. While you contract with CAL FIRE and they provide fire protection, they don't. The only place is a little bit in Chester, I think. Other than that, CAL FIRE contracts with the Forest Service for fire on the SRA lands. So we really don't have a CAL FIRE presence very strong at all.
The other piece is the lingering hatred for the SRA program, which people think violates the Constitution and their, God-given rights to not pay taxes or something.
It's a fee.
The fee,
It's
right.
it's everywhere.
Right, so, and it's still in court, so it's sort of like, oh, well, we'll
We
see.
don't know, but we're certainly going to ask for more money,
Yeah.
because we feel like that's the
Lead into
only
it,
thing we
you
can
might
do.
as well try to bring some back to them.
Right.
That's how
People
we're
would love
looking
to
at
see
it,
it come
we're not
back.
Yeah.
big on it either, but as far as
Yeah.
just bring it back, you've already paid into it, try to get some back into your community and have it work for you.
Yeah, and we actually did apply for funding through the SRA for a chipping program, but we got rejected because they said our administrative costs were too high. Our council didn't want to buy a chipper. So as we actually consulted with CAL FIRE during and before the submittal of the proposal, and they're like, buy a chipper and we'll see if we can help with the crews. Our council didn't want to buy a chipper, so we put in a proposal hiring local contractors, but it was about $1,000 a day. We asked for $150 grand for 150 days.
Do you have
And
a chipper?
They rejected it.
No, I'm good for you, don't
We
you?
are, the Yuba
I don't
Fire
think
Safe
it's
Council
worth
was
it.
able to buy a chipper through, I think it was PG&E grant
Yeah,
dollars,
I'm sure.
luckily. But what ultimately ended up happening was the county agreed to go ahead and take our chipper and facilitate the program with their own.
So we need to find something, and I think Public Works does have a chipper. Anyway, so we're still working on trying to figure out a chipping program, because with our air quality issues and our pile burning restraints, we don't really have a whole lot of other options right now. So we're gonna keep working on that, I'll keep you posted. And we are gonna hope that one day we'll have some kind of market for the biomass that we can then use to generate more revenue for our project. Any questions?
Yeah, on the biomass market, I mean, the only thing that really is changing right now is that there is a proposal that's been funded by Energy Commission and others to set up a small receiving facility in the central part of the county in Indian Valley that would develop a graded chip that's of a certain size and a certain moisture percentage, and that then could be used for small boilers and generators at various places in the county. Now, that's supposed to happen
Hey, John,
at
can
the
I
end
say
of
something?
next year.
It's happening.
It's happening.
We're funding that.
They're
Yeah,
funding.
but it happens when it will happen.
Well,
The
we're just
Energy
got the
Commission
agreement
has also
together.
funded a small boiler project for one of the county buildings.
Is that a gasifier or it's a,
No,
Not
it's
again.
just,
You
it's
can
just,
provide chips to the boilers throughout the.
It's combined heat and electrical generation.
Jonathan was gonna be here, but he flew back from DC on a red eye.
So it's a combined, it's a
I
combined
don't know what happened to him. Jackson, we need to
boiler.
call him.
I know, combined boiler and small electrical generation. The building itself has a heat pump system that doesn't work, so it's
Well
basically to
enough.
create water to heat the building, and with a little power generation.
And heat water for the dorms that are next door.
because for
The
us, it's an
biomass
hour.
market is, part of it is not good. I know, looking over here at Jay, and he's got a mill with, and it's just not good right now.
Well, it's because the electric folks don't want to purchase biomass
It's
energy.
not considered, yeah. That's a big part of it, is the market.
Okay, well, that's it for my presentation, so if you have any questions, that's fine, and if not, thank you.
Thank you. So we're gonna segue into, and we just wanna say, the reason that we're so happy you're here is as we move forward with developing our projects, and we have a landscape project, we've been really struggling with where does the Fire Safe Council effort fit into this? And so what we're hearing is the more that we can lump all these things together, knowing that you're fastest and the privates are there, and then we've got the Forest Service, which we all have to bring along.
Take a break.
That, well, it's kind of up to you guys, because then we've got to have, see how long will it take you to load up?
No, it's not long.
Okay. So we can either have you guys go and take a break, or we can take a break now and have you guys go after break.
Take a
What does
break.
everybody want to do?
I'm figuring I go first and you can,
Yeah.
because you're way more
And that clock is,
knowledgeable than,
that clock has not been adjusted to the time change, so.
I'm going by this.
Yeah. I went by mine the other day and it hadn't been adjusted either.
I have
breaking?
to go potty.
When do you want
Yeah,
to
I think
start?
we need to take a 5-minute break or so.
Yeah, that would.
And then
Oh, there.
you're gonna call
My daughter,
Christie. Yeah,
grandbaby.
so anyway, we're taking your name and being having to do with your experience and
Yeah, I work from my house.
growing up, dealing with water Eel River water and all that.
You know what, I ordered pizza.
So now you're bottom is like all the Round Valley.
Stick one on her, thank you.
This is according to Leo.
Yeah, because they're so slow.
You charge him more.
Watershed hydrology.
That's fair.
They are all.
And the mark you gave me.
My dad was a safety engineer.
Sucks for me.
Is Terry,
Alright, so that's what he's got.
okay, so I used to think he's, Terry at the airport.
So it's just here.
What are you gonna make?
Yes, from, do you ever so often?
I just got back to my board.
You did?
That's okay, you know what I found? One of my old findings was a diagram poster. Yeah, I forget what it's some water cycles and it's some. This drawing.
That was good.
Groundwater management, stream.
Yeah.
Terry's one that I started with. And then eventually, he actually brought up there with field work. So I did like out ROs.
Yeah, that's a.
So,
How many acres?
I do
In fact,
I do a lot of technical stuff, but, you know, I was just thinking, it's getting to a point where, you know, I got a handful of years. There's a lot of work. But also, there's some new stuff that because, you know, as I'm hearing some of this.
You know, but when you get down to the project level, you really have a project level that then it can just melts away. Once you go to the field, like we did with silver. So I only went 100 acres, so here's how much we got.
I should talk to Terry. Yes, I know. Yeah, are
Our collaborative is really centered for
I mean, going back. That's why I brought you. We would take this to branch out. We just talked about, just think about just a little bit outside of that. We were looking at stuff where they're special all the trees are anywhere from 5 feet. And they're all tall. They're all he's got almost so much material. He does a lot. And he's like, half his property is so growing at water. I don't know.
Let's bring everybody in here.
Instrument playing. And so for you.
One 5-minute break so goes up. Hey,
And this is like.
you're on. You did yellow.
They were talking about tree trimming.
Okay, find your seats, please.
I know we're selling these.
Like right now, I've got to get my car.
Oh, well, there is one on your chair.
Good.
You know, I still got a lot.
You were hatching it, or absorbing the information or something.
Okay, here you go.
It is one way to do it.
It is the best way I've found. I want to thank you for inviting the Butte County Fire Safe Council. I'm their wildfire safety education field coordinator, and on behalf of the director, Callie Jane Leanda, I want to thank you for that invitation. I'm not real learned in all the goings on, so I rely on Brenda, who was past director. She can correct me on anything that I may have brought up. Thank you. Just for those that are not sure where we're at, we encompass a little portion down here on this part of the scheme on this map. From the Sterling City down along the eastern side of Paradise, down around Lake Oroville, then up through to that quaint little community of Clipper Mills that I haven't had a chance to meet with, but we're working very heavily up in that area in the Mary Mountain Village of Clipper Mills. In order to get there, I drive into Yuba County and then come back. So it's in the very,
So there's some territory down there like Polga. Do you get down there at all, or?
we don't get up that far up the Feather River Canyon or Highway
Because the
7.
boundary is that, the crazy line.
Right,
At the top, yeah.
Yeah, it's up in,
right there.
No,
yeah, Polga's right in here.
Right.
We haven't got any projects up in there that I'm aware of since I've only been as their field coordinator for a year now. But the areas on the map here that have been identified, the Yankee Hill Concow area, which is this area right in here, which is Brenda's domain. And then the Berry Creek area, which is down in this portion right in here. And then we've got Feather Falls and Forbstown, which is this area back down in this area. And then we've got, I just mentioned the Clipper Mills and a small spot right up in here. And these are the acres treated within the map boundary of this organization. I'll give you a little, the next page kind of covers the history of the projects. Most of them done in the Berry Creek area have been hand cut, chipping, and file burning over the years, and they've been relatively small in nature. A couple of them were fairly substantial, and they totaled about 391 acres that they've treated in this area. The terrain in there is extremely steep, heavily vegetated, and a lot of rural roads, and it's a nightmare for the WUI.
It's one of the wettest spots in California.
Yeah, it gets a lot of rain that comes up, the orographic lifting as it comes up through the valley across Lake Oroville dumps right up in through here. So heavy vegetation, and of course, the landowners like that heavy vegetation around their houses. So it's been kind of a challenge for me, working on the defensible space portion of our program, the Workgroup program, to get up in there and get people's permission to do thinning. They just don't want anything done up in that area, and it's a shame because this is one area, if a fire ever gets going like we've had every summer down in the Feather Falls, Workstown area, it's gonna go, and of course then it's gonna have open and running up into the middle of the forest.
That's your next valley fire.
A very tough area.
Is that, you're talking about Berry Creek?
Yes.
Yeah, because I know we followed up with Randy Gould, the district ranger in that area, and he is trying to do a federal project.
That's one of our targeted areas, is working with the Forest Service to accomplish some substantial projects in that Berry Creek area. Like I said, some of them now, they've just been little roadside or residence assisted, small scale. And what we're realizing that was brought up is those small scales just don't work very well. They work for small isolated fires, but we're trying to connect the dots to the
Now,
different
one of the
agencies.
big projects that got going under Quincy Library was around, I'm just trying to think what the name of that lake is, coming up on 70 above Yankee Hill. Where the guy died in the fire. Yeah, And there was a fuel break developed there under Quincy Library Group, and I'm wondering, is that continuing to be extended, or what's going on
I
out
don't
there?
know where it's located, I didn't know you guys did a project in there.
Well,
under
there
QLG.
was sort of a joint venture between SPI and the Forest Service up there. And then the fire came along and did a lot of damage, including on both sides of the line.
Was it the SPI piece above Concal Lake?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's out of our community. We're kind of
Right.
like a bowl, and
Right.
at the top edge of a bowl at the north end is SPI land.
Right.
It got hit pretty hard through there. They've done wonderful restoration through there. They've replanted and it looks really nice right now.
So, but what you seem to be saying is there were no broad scale Forest Service work done as Quincy Library Group projects in the Butte County area on the Feather River District.
Well, if you just mentioned, because that would be Butte,
Yeah,
but yeah, no QLG was done. That, other than what you're just mentioning that I was aware of for that area.
so there's nothing done in the Big Bend area, no big projects in the Big Bend area or in the Berry Creek area?
Under QLG,
Yeah,
not that I
by
heard
Forest
about.
Service. Okay.
Okay, come on, you guys, move it.
In the next page would be the Forkstown, Fire Safe Council shaded fuel break history. They've accomplished approximately 514 acres in there, and that was, project description is a collaboration between Forest Service, Stevens Fund, Sierra Nevada Conservancy, private ownership, and some other, the Sheriff's Department work crew through the Butte County Fire Safe Council. And they were able to do quite a bit in the Forkstown area, and also up along the Feather Falls portion. The history in this area, as you can see, we just had about 3,000 acres burned this summer alone, and two separate fires down in the Forkstown area. One was the Lumpkin fire, and the other was the Swedes flood. They come out of these lower foothill countries and are making runs up into the heavier timber stands.
It's almost too bad we didn't get tested on our fuels work, because the fire lines didn't quite make it up to the treated acres, but almost.
Yeah, that was one of the.
Almost. I was like, come on, bring it on.
The Lumpkin fire, I understand, made it to a slapjack break that had been put in years ago, and that was how they were able to
Under
slow down
QLG, yeah.
and was able to stop that particular fire this summer. So,
Oh, good. Has that been written up at all?
as far as I know, I think it was written up in there, that, I know it was on the news media that they mentioned it, but you know how that goes. Once the news media doesn't run with it.
Yeah, have you seen anything out of the district yet?
No. But that's part of the commitment for that particular area, is it does have a bad fire history on this southeastern portion of Orville as it goes up into that front country. The next page is the Feather Falls area, which is basically an isolated community that relies on Lumpkin Road to come down through, and when the Lumpkin fire took off, it basically cut off their escape route. Their only way to go is up this country back toward Little Grass Valley Reservoir, back in through there. The fire history since 2008 to this year, 7,000 acres. They've had them back in here, so it's threatened that particular area. And all they're being able to do is with having shaded fuel breaks along the roadways, hand cut and chip. They haven't got any real large scale going in that particular area, and they need it, because it's another one of those narrow, windy roads getting into a lot of houses back in there, and the terrain is just unforgiving. The next page is Brenda's area, Yankee Hill, which is in here, and they've got the biggest acreage total of about 1,558 acres that's been treated down in the Yankee Hill, Concow area. And the little footnote on that, we don't have the fire history, but thanks to the Butte Lightning Complex in 2008, 106 dwellings and structures were destroyed with 11 outbuildings. And sheriff work crew doing cutting out there, and they have to put pie cuts in some of the manzanita. I mean, they're talking manzanita, we're finding that big around in there, so. As it states right here, a lot of the hand cutting, chipping, piling, burning, you did a large biomass hauling last year off of the old burn scar in that area. And she can give you more information on that area, that's her playground. This next page is just a series of photographs that depict the various projects that we've been doing. One of them, the one down in the lower left to this one here in the upper right, is a before and an after of a project we did up out of Forbestown on a private land where they used a variety of methods. One of them was the two middle pictures using a dozer and crush method, and also they used the chipper. And then down in the lower right is a cute little device. It's a remote operated chipper. If you've ever seen one. Okay, I just did a project for the last month with Crossfire company that owns this, and it's a remote operated. It's got the little box with the thumb levers, and they run this thing up on a 33 to 35 degree slope and chip.
So it's a drone chipper.
It's got tracks on it. It runs just like a tank, and it takes it all up. And I was amazed at where they took this thing back up in there. So it's a great tool for your roadless areas where you don't have roads in there. He can just walk this thing, and like I said, 33 to 35 degree slope, just walks that thing up and they chip.
My company just bought one of those this
Did they?
year because of the regulations for burning waste. You know, we said, well, it's never gonna pay for itself. I mean, it's an expensive machine.
Yeah,
But it's
this one-
remote controlled, you know, you can walk along, you can get on it and operate or walk alongside of it, and just with a little remote control, operate this huge piece of equipment.
Yeah, they can get it to do everything
Until
up
it
and
does its
down,
own thing, it goes off the road.
and they run it back and forth to the boom when they're chipping. They can spread the chips
Yeah.
remotely.
What's the name of it?
It's a remote operated chipper,
The track chipper.
track chipper.
And we had a larger one where the guy was in the tractor, and so it was really like a two-man operation. One guy in the tractor could spread larger logs in the contour area that was feeding through, and one ground person watching, but the guy in the tractor could use the remote and navigate the chipper to put it where it was handy for him. And it took some good-sized wood. This one's a smaller version. It sounds like you've got more of an industrial size.
Yeah, ours,
I think Paul told me
Twice
about
that
it.
size.
Didn't it not work it right at first?
there was a glitch in the thing, and it just kept walking.
Oh.
Luckily, it walked into the uphill side instead of going off the bank, but it just chugged itself to death until that
It's
big old
neat.
motor just quit, you know, running. But
The
it's
chute-
fixed now.
The chute's
fixed
neat because
now.
it just kind of it can pan, and it can really do a beautiful spread on the
Yeah, you
chip
can
product.
spread, or you can fill up a chip truck, or
Really
whatever
cool.
you wanna do.
I watched it take logs of 10-inch diameter.
Oh, yeah.
They just fed it in there, and it didn't take but a minute to run it through. He told me it ran him $85,000 was the cost on the chipper that is in that picture. That
It's a lot smaller.
Ours was a lot more expensive than that.
The next page is just a quick fact sheet that put on there. The governance of the Butte County Fire Safe Council is a 17-member board of directors representing local, state, federal, and community members. The management has 5 professional staff, 1 contractual education coordinator, and 6 fuels reduction contractors with 30-plus volunteers. The project implementation completed. We've got 8 roadside shaded fuel breaks, 4 landscape level forest health projects, watershed enhancement projects, and 12 years of a chipper and residence assistance program service, with also 10 years of a youth education program. We have a program with the local charter school with 6th graders that they go through and they learn all about the forest health and all of the different things that we've been discussing in here as part of their 6th grade education.
What's the name of that? I'm gonna put it in our RMSs.
It's just referred to as the 6th grade education program.
Okay.
The sixth grade curriculum,
And it's
wildfire curriculum.
Butte County Office of Education.
I'm sorry?
Is it Butte County Office of Education?
Butte County Fire Safe Council.
No, I mean,
It's through the charter
that,
school.
It's church.
but they're a spin-off of,
Do they go to
Yeah.
the Woodby
No.
outdoor education camp? No?
No,
to get it implemented. It looks like this year will be the first time a teacher's willing to run it. So it's whatever schools, it gets presented to the schools, it's whichever ones are willing to take it on, but it's a good program.
Financial accountability, they processed 113 grants, conducted 3 financial audits with no significant findings, received and put on the ground $5 million in grant and community funds over the past 10 years. Creating a wildfire safety community, Fire City Council assisted 5 FireWise communities, act as fiscal sponsor to 5 community organizations, and coordinate with 7 community fire safe councils, and plan through the community wildfire protection process of the Butte unit. Partnerships developed and sustained over 40 of them, and they're listed on the next page, with local, state, federal, and community organizations. And our statements: we value integrity, respect, safety, fun, positive experiences, and effectiveness as we collaborate with partners, volunteers, and staff to make a fire-safe community. Our mission is to provide safety in Butte County through wildfire hazard education and mitigation.
So I want to get a sense of the industry in the county. The Oroville electric generator got shut down, and are there any mills or electric generators in the county at this point?
The Rancheria on the southeast, is it Mindow? Moortown, Rancheria, is trying to put in a 3 megawatt biomass facility.
Oh, under the new
And so they're in the planning stages of that, and I don't know all the particulars. I know that they've got a lot of material already signed up for that, and so they feel that they're actually gonna have more material than they can handle.
Could you point out where that is going to be?
I believe it's going to be on the southeast portion of Oroville. If you take the Oro Quincy Highway out, heading towards the east, that's where the Rancheria is, and I believe that's the site area out there where they're gonna put it.
Near the
It's gonna be
casino?
on the casino.
I think it's past the casino,
They're gonna site it on the casino property.
on the casino property right there. I know there's a big clearing, I don't get through that area very much. I know they're clearing a lot of land in that general area out there past in the vicinity of the casino.
I think they're gonna use some of it for heating, for the facilities there.
For the casino?
Yeah.
But that's the only power generating outside the dam that's going on in that, in the county area. And the last page, the landscape planning in the Irwin boundaries. Number 1, project planning for a landscape level project in the Grizzly Creek watershed with Mary Mountain Village and Clipper Mills. The partners to be engaged, including Forest Service, CAL FIRE, and I'm not sure, but Soper Wheeler, that's a lot of your area in that area. I'm not sure on how that's gonna plan out.
Yeah.
The goal is to submit a Category 1 grant to the Sierra Nevada Conservancy in March of 2016. And what that area is we're looking at 4 sections. And right in the middle is Mary Mountain Village. And then we're trying, with conjunction with the Forest Service, to connect the dots. They've got a lot of projects going in the area. And we're trying to connect dots around the Clipper Mills and the Mary Mountain Village area, and working eventually with Soper Wheeler and the other property owners and landowners in that area.
This one is, which one is this, number 1?
Number 1.
Because what we're looking for as we develop our step 2 proposal, which is this region-wide, is one of the things that Ryan McKillop and I were struggling with when we were getting it done, is the phasing of things. How do you explain to people how these projects are gonna roll out? So having an example like this, a real-world one that shows how you go from the WUI to the private landowner to the Forest Service, given that they're all gonna move at different speeds, how does that really look, is something we're actually really trying to incorporate into our, when we finalize this proposal. We want examples of that sort of thing, so
Yeah.
as much detail as you can give us.
This is a good one for us, Soper, to participate in.
And one of the little backgrounds on this, if you're not aware, Butte County Sheriff Honey has dedicated one of his work alternative crews to doing nothing but fuels reduction work for me.
That's great.
So
That's
I've
one thing
got,
we really need in the county is to use our
Do we
innovation.
have,
and it's free. It
Okay,
doesn't
so let's get some more information on that one, and we can move that around. No, because the reason you guys are here is like, we need to fit these pieces into this plan.
And so I'll give you a little bit more on it. He's absorbing the money in his budget. He purchased a van, outfitted it for, and it can carry as many, I think, as 8 inmates. He bought a trailer, it's just basically a aluminum shell that's got a toilet, water tank, self-contained for all his tools. And they do nothing but fuels reduction work for us. This is where we get all our residence assistance programs done, the defensible space around houses. I've been able to get, I think we had 35 or 40 or more homes done throughout Butte County by using the sheriff crew to come in and do that work around the people's houses. I just had them working on a project around McGaley Reservoir, and we utilized the sheriff work crews, the CAL FIRE inmate crews, and a private contractor to do 30 acres of watershed right on McGaley Reservoir. And so I've got a project starting with DWR in December, Lime Saddle Marina up the Feather River, which is right, this area right down in here. Because it's such a small scale, it really ties up and doesn't work well with getting the NEPA and the state hand crews in there. But they can utilize the sheriff crew at no charge. And I can go in there with the sheriff crew in conjunction with state parks and DWR, and we can do a fuels reduction project. Do whatever the technique, lop and scatter, or stack for them to burn at a later date with whatever method they choose. But it's at no cost, and that's where we're able to get a lot of these little projects started, especially Mary Mountain. They went into the community, and with that sheriff crew, we did a lot of pre-thinning through the large openings already. Now we're gonna try to tie in with the Forest Service and the others to make it a large scale. There's a plan in the works to put in an escape route for this community. And once they do that, there's no monies available, but with the use of the sheriff crew, I can go in there and we can do the cut and work, and then also through our chipper program is how we did a lot of the work. Is the crew came in, cut, stacked, and then we brought the chipper in and utilized them under the chipper program that we have.
So, I think Placer County uses some, local inmates, not the ones that the CAL FIRE, but I know Nevada County rejected it. The issue is that you have these inmates on private property, and it didn't go over well in Nevada County.
Yeah, there's
Looked at it
certainly
10 years ago.
management issues.
And one of the things that, before I do any of these projects with the private landowners, is they sign an agreement, permission slip.
Oh, I think it's great
You know,
that
and so-
you've
Yeah,
been
because
able to do
could
it.
you give us more information on it? Because that's something I'd really like to push around here and see where
Like
it
I say,
goes.
we tie it up with it, that's one of the other pages in your handouts, our chipper program. We marry the two up a lot, because the crew does the work, and then the chipper program comes through and does the chipping for us, and it ends up costing no money. So that's a big, it's a small scale, but we're looking at how to start with small, and we start small, and start connecting the dots like you mentioned. How do we start connecting the dots? Well, this is one way we start, and then some of these other larger projects, the grant money, they're applying for, and it's just gonna take time.
But there's really no limitation on where you could go with the crews.
So far, I've worked them on private property with permission. Paradise Irrigation District, I worked on there, and they work on the county roads. We haven't done anything yet under my deal with the federal agencies yet. That's something that may come up eventually in working with the Forest Service or BLM.
I'd like to fool around with some kind of description of this and get it in our plan, okay? So can you guys help us out?
The other piece is, like, for the last 25 years, we've been whining at the Department of Water Resources for being so lame about being involved in any watershed work whatsoever anywhere in our county. And I'm intrigued by your work with DWR in this arena. We consider the entire county to be their watershed.
This is part of the settlement agreement for Orville, the 2105 license.
I see, but I think in general, we'd like to broaden their
I have their
worldview.
name and number, I'm gonna call them.
How this worked out is, down here in the eastern side in the Loafer Creek area, they've got a large portion in there that they've been working on large scale and going through NEPA and getting the CEQA and all that going and utilizing the state hand crews, the larger crews. This happens to be one of those areas where it's kind of a last minute, but yet we're trying to get what we can. And so we approached DWR and saying, is there anything we can do? And we threw force, we have the sheriff crew and we have a chipper program at no cost. Could we do it? Because we're trying to drum up business, we're trying to work these relations. And DWR at the meeting went, wow, no cost. Ding. You know, the light bulb went on and all of a sudden they went, sure, and they went through and made sure, and we went out, did a site visit. We invited State Parks, who does manage the DW land in there, and I wanted to make sure their representative was there with us to address any cultural sites that are all in that area, as well as the vegetation and everything else so we can follow their plan, and they went, perfect, that sounds great.
Well, that might be a good short-term strategy. DWR's got big pockets, and they should be paying for a lot more of what they're doing now.
John?
And not just taking advantage of free opportunities. They
Yeah,
should
and
have
right now, in
programs.
the short term, it's benefiting us because the big thing, it goes back to is the county sheriff.
Stop.
You know, he's able to, and his staff, he's able to
It's
use
been
this
so
in a
well
public
behaved.
relations
Stop.
way.
Okay, I'll stop.
My
I just want to tap in on that, because John brings up a good point. There are agencies that have pockets of money, but what he's doing and what that partnership starts is we're coming to offer something. We're not coming to always
Yeah,
ask you
it
for
is
something.
good.
Once that starts, that's happened in Concal, the Thermalito Water and Sewer District. I went to go get a partnership with them on a grant, they didn't even want to hear it, so I wrote the grant anyway with them involved. And when we got funded, I went and said, I have this funding, and it happened to be all on their land, so I was hoping by that time they'd say yes. And of course, the light bulb goes off. Now, they have been maintaining the whole area on their dime, so it is a way to form a bridge.
You're probably right. That's the best way to do it.
Trina?
Steps, baby steps.
I also had a question, have you been able to engage any of the tribal entities in your area?
We haven't that I'm aware of, but it is being addressed for the future for some of these projects. I just working in part of it, so I don't get a lot of the upper level
Right, and
that she does.
I know Moretown Renteria specifically
Mhm.
they really ramped up their equipment and fire crews and, can.
They work real good for us on the
Supportive
Forgestown.
of the projects, they had their crew out of projects for Forgestown. And matter of fact, our fire council meeting in Yankee Hill is this Sunday, and we have, my new representative coming for a future project they're looking at and looking to partner with us too. So we do
Okay.
have some, interface with the local tribes.
That was one of the things I'd mentioned for the Deer Creek getting GIS and their updated and pinpoint maps. Is the project we just did not only had the timber that we had to deal with, it had cultural sites, and it also had riparian areas, bald eagle nests, and also had a historical dump site from the early days when they built the railroad. But we didn't have an accurate mapping of that. And so that was one of the things that I brought up and we're trying to work on, and we'll be
This
probably.
is a little bit off of that, but kind of related. I have it's a hand-drawn map, so the exact GIS data points aren't there, but, it's before Lake Oroville was built, and it's a map of all the cultural resources in the area that my uncle drew, my great uncle, and, so right in that region is the condor nesting tree, which would be an amazing place to actually find. But there are a lot of other cultural resources that aren't.
And we just wanted that because when I go out and do these project sites, I'd like to have it on a map so I can do an accurate where we stay out of and because we're doing the mosaic pattern like this, when we did a mosaic pattern and around the eagle nests and some of the other sites in there, I flagged it off, but their mapping was really poor. So that's something that we're gonna push in the future with you and maybe something, I don't know how you are with your mapping, of course, you've got an end to it. Which is a benefit for these.
It's coming together.
So we're trying to take in all this stuff on our future plans, the cultural sites specifically and all the other entities. And then finally, my boss was wondering on exploring questions, which organizations in the Sierra and Northern California are engaging in landscape level planning and what methods are they using? And what mapping resources are others using? Because my boss is very interested, as I am, in getting accurate maps.
So, on that, one thing that I use a lot, just in general, is it's an app for your phone called PDF Maps. And it's really great because if you have some kind of GIS program or any kind of map that you can into your phone, and when you're out in the field, you can basically, your phone has a GPS, and it can show you where you are in relation to your project. So that's something I recommend you guys try to integrate, because, you know, it's not accurate to 1 meter, you know, it's probably 30 meters or something, whatever, but it's pretty good. So if you wanna just be oriented on where you are on a piece of property in real time on your phone, it's a really, it's a
Or
free app.
tablet.
Or tablet. It's a free app, and especially if you have any kind of GIS capabilities within your organization, you can build your own map, and then you can just save it as a PDF, and then basically, and this might all sound Latin to you, and if it does, let me know. But it's a tool, I'm not a real wizard with maps, but it's a tool that I use a lot, and it's something that's really hands-on. And then if you're walking around with landowners on their property or anything, developing a project, you can show them, you know, like, hey, look, here's where we are, and then they can be like, oh, that makes sense, you know, and at a real small
I've got
scale, it
the-
doesn't, you lose your resolution, but just in general, it's a nice tool, and
How's
it's
the
easy to
resolution?
use.
Is it, I've got a GPS that's 24K resolution
I don't know.
on the map,
These could be, you know, like 3500 scale,
which is more,
which is better, it's like
Okay.
8 times closer in.
okay. And that's what I'm looking at right now is in,
You have like a Garmin with a screen?
yeah. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do is I'm trying to get some information so we can start a base for the future to build on. Because I know she mentioned talking with you, Zeke, and trying to get some stuff going and getting maps that show all of this stuff. Because right now we've got a page here, a page over there, a couple pages over here. And
Well, it's very
she's
important.
wanting to do like this, get a big, large scale mapping so that when we do these, and to cut back on time, I don't mean to cut you off. This is a invitation to anybody for a lunch that we're gonna have on December 2nd there in Paradise. We'd like everybody to stop by and enjoy the festivities and partnerships for the wildfire safety. I'm not sure what they all have planned for it, but I know the food's good. And then this last one is our chipper flyer. It just shows the chipper program with our phone number and some of the requirements. And also at the bottom, the Net 411 is the website that we have for monitoring scanner, getting fire information, et cetera, like that. So that you can actually go on that site when there's a fire in the area and get real-time information and also listen to the scanner if a person doesn't have that, so you can listen to all the information in real time.
Yeah, I gotta say, between that and your Facebook page, it's huge. You know, when there's a fire in Butte County, I get on your Facebook page and on your scanner, and it's great. It's the best intel we can get.
Yeah, there's a lot of people throughout the county that are really up on it, and they're right on top of things, so there's a lot of real-time information being passed through that. With that, is there any questions or comments or anything?
I have one more comment, and it's to you, but it's also to everybody else in the room. And looking at previous wildfires, catastrophic fires, or other lower impact fires, from our perspective, it's tribal people, that's the prime time to reburn because the liability, the fuels reduction has already been done. And so, you know, really looking at those areas and reprioritizing, there's less liability because, you know.
So it's
It's
already
not less
There's-
liability.
Well, it depends on how soon afterwards. If you wait for 12 years, it's not, but if it's a year after, 3 to 7 years after, then to be able to look at that and maybe even target areas, yeah, the liability,
It's hard because
yeah.
what you don't see is
Well,
when
there's less
PG&E
fuels,
needs to
right.
come in and drop trees to protect the line system. We had about 100,000 of those trees drop within our community. And that mixed with dead
And they're still there.
vegetation, it's still standing dead vegetation,
Right.
it still can, I mean, burns well.
It's a lot
And you get the
of
new
fuel.
growth that comes right into it, so you get all these
Well,
dead
especially,
debris with new growth that starts popping in.
especially dry
It's-
grasses after, which is the first
Yeah,
such.
it's get you on.
Okay, I'll talk a little bit about that.
Okay, we have one more presentation before lunch. Lunch is on the way, and thank you guys, and I hope that, I don't know how we get this fire safe thing into our plan, folks. So I'm just gonna have to follow up with you and Callie and make sure that we can wrap it into the project development, okay? And same with, Columbus. And Lassen.
says, we need more fire on the ground, and you should burn more, and, I see the foresters cringe, and, you know, we're working, so where some of that's coming from is, we've done a lot of work looking at the landscape scale, so, I appreciate the challenges of getting fire on the ground on private land, and I don't want to trivialize them. I am an unabashed prescribed fire booster, and I feel like it's the tool we really need to expand use of. It's the only tool that we're going to be able to use at scale. Smoke and everything else notwithstanding, you know, there's no number of challenges to us getting it done, but I will continue to push hard on us trying to expand use of it. So what I'm going to talk about a little bit is landscape scale planning to prioritize projects. And a lot of people who are funding projects want to see this landscape scale prioritization before they start giving people money. In 2004, I worked on a project with Barry Kallenberger for the Fire Safe Council here, where we did a landscape scale prioritization of Plymouth County. Identified the areas that were kind of at the highest hazard, and they were able to use that to get many millions of dollars worth of federal funding, because they've gone ahead and done a countywide prioritization. So I'll talk a little bit about the tools we use to do that.
Where is it?
It's
Where
on,
is that
it's
thing?
on the Fire Safe Council website.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so there's so what we work on is how do we apply these commonly used fire behavior modeling tools that have been developed by the Forest Service and federal agencies, along with mapping and you know, talking to old timers, and how do we integrate all this into kind of a story that's compelling and helps us to set priorities at landscape scale. This area here is about 1.2 million acres in the mid-Klamath watershed. So this is the Salmon River here, and this is the Klamath River comes through the middle of it, and down here is Wichipeg and the Trinity River, Klamath River confluence. This is a map of fire history. So going back 100 years, looking at areas and how many times they've burned. So the areas in red haven't burned in 100 years. Some of these areas down here shown in blue have burned 7 times. So Klamath has had a lot of fire, but they haven't had as much fire as they need to keep their forests healthy. We were up working on the Happy Camp complex last year that burned through a big patch over the red that hadn't burned in 100 years, and we saw really high fire intensities. A lot of, you know, we're used to seeing maybe, you know, 30 or 40% high intensity fire in a large landscape scale fire. But that one was, you know, more like, there were a lot of portions of it that were more like the Moonlight Fire, where you saw 60 or 70% high mortality.
Where'd you get that data layer at?
This is available statewide. This is from the Forest Service, and it shows all the fires. And what we've done here is, instead of taking just all those polygons, we've added up all the places they overlap.
Yeah.
So that gives you, you know, kind of
So it's like 100-acre fires?
everything over. I think that it's more likely you'll get everything over 300 acres. Sometimes they map smaller stuff, sometimes larger. So this was one of the elements we used in this landscape scale project, which was basically a big GIS exercise. So, and this monitor's a little funky on color, but basically you've got these different colors in here that tell you how many different attributes you have that are you know, values at risk. So the white here is basically the WUI area, the private lands. And what we did is we took mapping of every structure location, and we buffered that by 200 feet. We took mapping of all the historic fire lines, and we buffered that by you know, 100 feet, or I can't remember exact numbers.
Is that a Forest Service layer, that one?
Yeah, that, and we worked with some old timers that we had separate grant funding to map all the historic fire lines. So we used mapping that we had digitally, and then we also used old maps from like going back to 1987 and the fires they had there. Because they realized that, hey, every time there's a big fire, we draw the same box. Let's look at these areas and then prioritize them for treatment. If we have money to spend on fuel breaks, let's go and clean up old dozer lines that we used 20 years ago, because we'll be in there again. So we took about 27 different data layers and we stacked them all up. And everywhere that they add up, you get a little redder color. So what that tells us is like, okay, you know, this is a south-facing slope. It's got crown fire hazard. That's elk winter range. That's within 100 feet of main access route. That's near the fire line. Whatever. It helps you to really say down to the, you know, we're looking at about 1/4 acre pixels there, and it gives you a score for each one. Then if you want to develop a fuels project, you know, like maybe something down here, you can put all your projects on the map and then score them, and it'll tell you what's the average score of values at risk you have in that. So if you throw 100 treatment polygons on here, then it'll give you a score and say, well, that one scored out lower because you're not near the WUI, or you're not in a place that's got a current crown fire hazard, or you're not in a place that's close to a fire line. So we use that to kind of help them drill down to a scale that it really showed them that their assets at risk were really the WUI that was along the river corridor, and it was in south-facing slopes that were plantations that needed to be thinned. And where they're going with that, so this is this 1.2 million acre area is a collaborative between the Forest Service, the Karuk and Yurok tribes, and the Happy Camp, Orleans and Somes Fire Safe Councils. And what kind of come out of that, on this poster over here, they've developed some fairly large scale, like 15,000 acre treatment units near the community of Somes Bar. And the Forest Service is in the process of doing the NEPA to do these large landscape scale burns. And before they do that, they need to treat the WUI. Almost all the land over there is Forest Service. So they're really focusing on treating the WUI so then the community becomes comfortable with prescribed fire and feels safe when they want to do these larger landscape scale burn units. And another element in that kind of strategy is they've got long-term funding for a program called TREX. TREX is put on by the Fire Learning Network, which is a network, it's a collaboration between the Nature Conservancy, BLM, Forest Service. It's an international program, and they're about building capacity at the local level to have fire-adapted communities. And one of their big initiatives is TREX, which is the Prescribed Fire Training Exchange. And one thing that's been identified all over the country is that there's
It's called TREX?
TREX,
TREX. Could you spell that?
T-R-E-X.
Okay.
So RX being prescribed fire. All over the country, there's people who want to get their burn boss qualifications, or their ignition specialist, or their holding boss. These fire positions that are specific to doing prescribed fire. And there's we've got a real there's a lot of people who want to do those sorts of qualifications who don't have enough prescribed fire in their local district or in their local unit to get it done, or even for private contractors. So we've been involved in this program, helping them. Our main business is to go out on wildfires and map the fires daily, but we can apply those same skills to help them organize and run these TREX exchanges. So over in the Klamath, they've got stable funding from the Fish and Wildlife Service and from CAL FIRE to develop prescribed burning projects. So basically, they're putting in for SRA grants to reduce fuels in the urban interface, but instead of doing chipping or massification, they're using prescribed fire as initial entry. And so we spent the last month over there. We did a 2-week TREX on the Klamath River, and we did a 2-week TREX in Hayfork and Weaverville and Whiskeytown. And part of that is, this is a crew that's training in monitoring fire effects. So we had a cadre that was focused on operations who were doing ignitions, and then we have another cadre that is mapping fire spread rates, and we're doing plots before the fire, during and after, to see, are you getting the effects you want, and are the prescriptions that you're using meeting the objectives of the burn. This is burning right down to someone's house. A lot of the units were burning right in people's yards in areas that have not been thinned. And we're burning at night, and we're burning, with prescriptions that, are based on fire behavior calculations. So for people to get their burn boss qualification, they have to learn about using the modeling tools like Behave and the spread tools that help you calculate fire behavior based on fuel loading tons per acre. So during this program, we're going out and we're mapping the fuels, and we're doing weather every day for the 3 days leading up to the burn, and we're doing fuel moisture readings twice a day.
So is the box that you're referring to the place in time and space?
The box, we said.
Burn box, when you
The
talk.
burn boss, the burning boss qualification, to be the guy who's in charge.
Right.
You have to write an official burn plan, which includes fuel moisture and prescriptions. But a lot of this is, so we end up burning a lot at night.
I thought you said box.
Yeah, they said box earlier, though. You did say box. About
We burn right around,
Are you visually estimating fuels, or how are you measuring those?
The fuel loading?
Yeah.
That's, some of the places are doing plots, like the Forest Service land where they're putting together these burn plans. They're doing Brown's surveys. this, so then also, the SRA funds that they're getting are going to pay Firestorm to come with fire engines as part of the training. So if you get, they got a $200,000 grant to treat these 400 acres. And then that paid for feeding all the people that come to be part of the treks, paid for Firestorm to show up with 3 or 4 fire engines, pays for the volunteer fire department to bring a water tender out. A lot of
Where's
fire,
the Forest Service on this? What are they hanging out on the ridge? What are they doing?
they're back at the station hoping nothing goes wrong.
Okay.
This year, last
Well,
2 years,
things only go wrong when they're involved.
Okay.
the Forest Service is, this year we burned some Forest Service piles, but the Forest Service over in Orleans, they've been kind of waiting to see what happens. This year, though, we did have CAL FIRE presence every day. They brought an engine as a contingency resource, and then they had an observer. And we actually did get some video of them actually lighting, but we thought we wouldn't share. So a lot of what we're cleaning up is, over in that country is a lot of oak and Doug fir litter, and a lot of places, not really heavy service fuel loading. This last one we did, it was right before the storm, so we weren't, we were burning on kind of the cool ends of the prescription. If anything, we were concerned that we weren't getting it burned hot enough. On this one, we only consumed about half of the litter volume. We consumed a lot of down logs, but we didn't kill the small trees that we wanted to kill. So it's, it's, even though it looks, photos like this look dangerous and scary to most people, oftentimes, we're burning in conservative windows at night when the humidities are high enough that, there haven't been any escapes. And they've been doing the program for a few years. There's more treks photos. This is another unit we burned last year for the volunteer fire chief. And in the Klamath country, they're worried about encroachment of conifers into historic prairies because of fire suppression. This gal, she said pretty much, you can burn all this as hot as you want. I don't want you to kill my big madrone and my big oak. But she realizes that a lot of this conifer around the edge of her prairie is encroachment. So she was down with us killing, torching out some, 80-foot tall cedar trees. But basically her request was, hey, burn as hot, I want more prairie. It's definitely, smoke's definitely a concern in a lot of these places. Basically, we got exemptions from statewide burn ban from CAL FIRE under a public health and safety exemption. So there's a statewide burn ban both years because they haven't declared end of wildfire season. But they're able to use the health and safety exemption saying we're improving community safety to get around that. There are also burn bans because of smoke. But basically, part of what we're doing, part of our prescription is that we have to be meeting smoke management objectives. And this last one, there was a meteorologist that was on contract. We keep track of that. Every day we're getting spot weather forecasts. And we've got smoke observers, basically, that are watching the column from different distances. In Hayfork, I was a smoke observer one day, and our objective was to make sure the smoke didn't impinge on the highway, and that it didn't impinge on the community. And basically, we can shut down, the smoke observers can shut down the burn if we see, oh, it's starting to smoke in Hayfork, it's starting to smoke out the road. We can shut down ignitions. This is an initial entry, and this is, most of us would look at this and say, that's nightmare fuels, and you'd be crazy to go in there and burn it. This side of the road looked just like that when we started. Burning at night.
But you're backing down, right?
We're backing down to that, yeah. But there's, so I think the learning lesson for me coming from this is that there's a lot of things that you would look at and say there's no way we could put fire in there, no way we could control that. Back to what Trina brought up earlier is that a lot of this is about designing units that have a built-in safety buffer. So in 2013, there was a fire right in the middle of the town of Orleans that burned a couple hundred acres on a river bar and went right through town, burned a few homes, and then went up the hill. So we burned that last year, and we burned it again this year, and then that we had good black between us and the town. Basically, there was a lot of grass fuel looting. But other areas, there was no heavy fuels. There was no there was standing dead brush, but we didn't have the mix of fuels that was really going to carry fire very well through that recently burned area. So what we've been trying to do in designing these units is look at places where you do have a wildfire, and then have burn close to that. It's almost almost like if you can come in the year of the wildfire or the year after the wildfire and take advantage of that black, most of the time the firefighters are working like crazy to keep the fire out of the WUI. And the fire burns on the national forest right down to the WUI, but it doesn't burn in on the private land. We can come and we can clean out, we can burn, and know that even if we lose it here, in this case, there was Forest Service land above this on the hill that had been treated, and we knew that we'd pick up a fire if we lost it in that treated land. So a big part of managing that risk is to look at designing units that are large enough and aren't surrounded by, you don't want to burn at the bottom of a south-facing slope with continuous fuel at the top of the ridge. But we have to be really strategic about picking these opportunities as we initiate getting more fire into these places. This is just one more burning right in the WUI. And the community over there is very supportive. When we burned right in town, there was an old lady that was watching really closely, and I had a feeling she was nervous about being there. She was really upset. And I went over and talked to her, and she said, we're so glad you guys are here. This burned, when it was burned 2 years ago, I was sure I was going to lose my house. And so when you show up in Nomex, even though a lot of us are working for nonprofits or aren't everyday firefighters, we come in, we have that Nomex on. We have the instant trust that the community has for firefighters. She said, you guys saved my home 2 years ago, and I trust you guys know what you're doing. Anyway, what these guys have done in the Klamath, I think they've taken advantage of the fact that they're out in the middle of nowhere and really no one cares too much what happens. CAL FIRE in Siskiyou County doesn't care too much. This is in Siskiyou and Humboldt counties, but it's so far out in the middle of nowhere. Siskiyou, CAL FIRE, it's not their SRA, and they're the ones that have to sign a permit, but they don't really, there's not a lot of political fallout for them if something goes wrong out in the middle of nowhere in a Klamath country.
Did you include that picture with the bullholes just for the lawlessness element, or is that coincidental?
It's coincidental. Yeah, this is Orleans.
Shots, huh?
It's a unique, Orleans is a unique community. We were cutting hand line to protect landowners' marijuana grows. And they've built a lot of community trust in this program through the Fire Safe Council over the last 15 years. But I'd say that we're definitely interested in seeing how we can take this out to, and maybe it won't work in Concal, maybe it won't work in Bear Creek, but there's places in Plumas County that have similar, low population densities, places that we aren't going to smoke in, where we can expand this program. And what it's doing is giving the locals a taste for taking responsibility to do it themselves.
Hey, the woman of the hour.
So I had a question. Have you, or do you do analysis of how this reflects on the carbon balance or not? One of the criticisms I've heard in the past is that to use prescribed fire as the initial entry means that you're using up budgeted releases that could be used for post-treatment finishing of thinning projects. So that implies that someone's keeping track, which of course no one is keeping track, but it implies some sort of trade-off there in less acres that you can do on the back end of a thinning project because you're spending them on the front end of a project or as the initial entry, and using up precious
Smoke credits.
But when you compare that to the trajectory of where we're going with these large fires, catastrophic fires, there's no comparison. I mean,
So,
you're saving so much carbon by doing this rather
Yeah.
than the certainty of it burning up completely someday.
so
Which is the same argument for thinning.
to finish this up, what we're looking for and why you guys are here is that how do we introduce these ideas into our plan? And, whether you pick an area and you use it as a case study and this is what we've learned and how, I'm really relying on you here and then Nils, just to bring this piece in here, the WUI, the line between the communities and the Forest Service, and recognize that we don't have CAL FIRE, this whole thing about how to use the sheriff's crews, those are the things, and I thank you so much, those are the insights we need to go from the landscape scale that we've been going through down to this community piece scale and fire and fuels and how do you do that. Those are pieces that are not fleshed out in our plan right now. And we're not gonna have all the answers, but we definitely wanna have like boxes or case studies or things in there that show people how you could do these things, how you can go from the little to the big, how you go from fuels to fire, how, and what resources and, you know, the tribal piece. And those are just pieces that are hanging. We've done a lot and we've gotta finish this plan up in the spring, and this is some pieces over this winter that we're gonna have to tighten up to show scheduling, scale, how you go from one thing to another, what you do in the long term. You know, when I think about the storage bond and the money we're competing with, they wanna know when fire comes back in, or how you maintain these treatments, or your useful life is 1/10 of a dam, you know, and I don't like those kind of equations, so we're gonna have to change it. And so, just before we break for lunch and you finish up, I just wanna leave you with the challenge that we really do have to get this down on paper, even if we do cases, community cases, or some way to help us figure that piece out when we flesh out that regional proposal.
Is there any thought process into doing a video
For the plan,
for the plan to
oh my
incorporate
God,
it?
video, she says never again, but you
Incorporated everything you just talked of, so for the education of the public, to get their support, because as we said earlier in here, I'm running into a lot of people, majority of them have no idea what you just talked about, or what you talked about, or how everything relates. But if they could produce a video somehow through the media, even if it's on YouTube or something, to where it would show the cultural concerns, how it plays into the deal about what fire is. Because I know I did 34 years fighting fire, and I know every time we talked about doing fire, people went,
I know.
but when they understood the reasoning as you presented it, how you present it, how you look for and explaining, would that be something that this group might want to recommend?
Well, yes, that's, I'm, like, you guys are here for a reason, okay, we're at the point in this planning process where we need to, we need you, Zeke, and we need you guys to help us put something together that gets to this and the tribal piece.
Well, I love the use of fire and working to educate residents. I'd love to see us get to that scale personally. But I know in our area, in the Concow region, because there's been so much fire history in the Concow-Yankeeville area, the residents there are so gun shy, that it's not just the reasoning on why fire, when it's good fire, to go to the community, but showing successful prescribed burn projects. All the community and residents see are what goes haywire, burns the community, and it, you know, and it was a responsibility of this and responsibility of that, because there is a lot at risk there. And when Forest Service did a prescribed fire, I think it was last summer, or summer, but within a year or two, I mean, they didn't get notification out very good in our community, and our community just saw their
The
hill on
smoke on
fire
it.
again. It was a night glow, and it just freaks them out. So we have a fire and weather watch webcam up in our area, and I got just a couple newsletters about some of the specific projects we have in our area, up Concow and Yankee Hill. But I mean, I would love to see fire get used responsibly, but I think we also need to see more successes of it, that it can take place, and these are the values that come from it. But there's just been a lot who've damaged that too.
Yeah, I feel like it goes back to like we need
Not
to start
taking
teaching it in
responsibility.
elementary school.
Yeah, there's so many examples of where fires have come up to, or burnt up to a treated area or a previously burned area, and that's where the fire stopped, and that's information that doesn't make it out in the public enough either. Case after case after case
Successes
after
would be
case.
wonderful.
Okay, so, all right, so we're honing in on what we need to see here.
Okay,
Trina?
so along that line too, well, of what you just said, with TEK, we've never had the opportunity to integrate it into these types of processes with this type of collaboration. And so, on those fires with the Hupa and the group, were there specific objectives that they had for the fire, and how were they planned for, implemented, and what is the
Yeah.
long-term monitoring? It would really be helpful in the process that we're undergoing to integrate TEK into the Upper Feather River.
Yeah.
To be able to look at how the tribes
Yeah.
work in partnership with other.
Yeah, there's a
entities.
fire council that's part of the Yurok tribe, Fire and Fuels Council, and they develop facing slopes, and we burned it hot in the middle of the day, looking to pretty much, they were less concerned there with killing the Doug fir on the site. They felt like it was prairie that was being encroached, so they wanted to burn it as hot as we could burn it without losing it up the hill. So we burned it hot, and then this year they've got sprouts from the hazel that are what they want. So they felt like it was successful in that we burned it as hot as we could. And then this year, downriver from there, it wasn't hot enough. They had other hazel units to burn, but we weren't going to be able to, under the conditions we had, we weren't going to be able to get them to burn hot enough, so we didn't like them.
Okay, you guys, so this is what we need next. Jay?
Hey Zeke, one of the big concerns we have, especially in our managed forests from Fish and Wildlife, is how we're going to maintain structural diversity, especially large woody debris. In the little bit of burning we've done, we cannot protect, I mean, those big logs that are dry, they go up even in relatively light fires.
Yeah.
What are you guys doing to try to protect that structural element?
Well, we line a lot of snags. If we can put water on them, we do. So, but a lot of that focuses on stuff that's going to be a control issue near the road. And it's, you have a lot of roads, so it could be that you use your roads and dozers to exclude areas that have large down wood.
It's almost impossible to do that because it's punky and all it takes is one ember in that snag or that log and it's gone.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
We've done that, we've been out there with a fire truck trying to put them out, and we put one out, and there's another one over here on fire. By the time we go to that one, this one over here is back on fire again.
Yeah.
And in areas where we've done it, we've lost about 80% of the snags and the large woody material that we were trying to save. So, I mean, that's one thing. We probably have more of that today with the exclusion of fire. And so everybody thinks that's natural, and they think you need to have 6 snags per acre. I don't think historically we ever had 6 snags per acre if we were having fires every 15 years.
Yeah,
that's always what burn up. But that is a component that we have to address.
Yeah, for sure.
And when you're biomassing, you can go around those. That's one advantage of doing mechanical thinning.
Yeah.
You have a little more control on what is removed.
Yeah. Well, I think too, there's a lot of ground that we're not going to be, that we do need to look at the ground that we're not going to be able to treat otherwise. The steep ground that's not in active timber management in the canyons, and that's going to be where we want to use the tool. And if you can get in there and do it mechanically, then that's probably what you're going to do.
That's it, okay.
So have you written that down, that nuance,
Yeah,
that you just
see,
enunciated?
everything you said, if we should have taped you, well, we did tape you, but, what we want in this case study is your thinking process for how you do this.
Well, yeah, we need help from, and I appreciate comments like that, because it's like, a lot of what we're talking about is idealistic and theoretical, and then you guys have got some really
These
specific.
guys are never shy about telling you how it really works.
Well,
But these are some issues you don't have.
We want to have all the different tools at our
right,
disposal.
exactly.
Well, exactly. That's why this plan could be real, and it needs to be real.
Okay, so I hope what we got out of that was just that, what the Klamath is doing is it's going from the landscape scale down to the neighborhood scale. And that's helping them to get money because they can say, we've looked at the whole landscape and our high value areas are here around the community. They get money and they're able to treat it using prescribed fire.
Now, this was an actual project that you can send us with the price tag, right? Okay, because,
You should talk to Mid-Klamath Watershed Council because I'm not their accountant.
huh?
You should, the project we did for them, or you should
Well,
talk
what
to
I'm
them.
getting at is back to introducing this concept, into the regional project, which is really the only place we can put some of these things, is we need you guys to describe it, and then,
We've already done it, a lot of it, like this map over here, there's this kind of hard to read flaming color theme to it. That's a prioritization we did with a similar model at Klamath for you guys. So looking at south facing slopes that have a
Like-
crown fire hazard.
all right, well, then you have to write it up so we can stick it in as, how do we do this? How do we scale? How do we schedule? Where do we do it? Where do we not do it?
She's looking for a process and a template.
Right.
Right.
Are
That's
you
right.
done? Do you have
I'm done.